All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to give probably another minute, and but it looks like we have a majority of our committee here, and see some of our applicants standing by. And a big thank you to Shruti for setting this up again tonight. I know she had another conflict, but she's helping us out again tonight. So.
Did John Carter get an invitation? I don't see him.
Yes, he got an invitation, but
and there he is.
I can text him.
No, he's on. He's on. All right. So looks like we're recording, Shruti. So looks like we're good to go. So listen, it's 7:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have definitely a quorum here tonight. Good evening, everybody. I'm Rob Walker, and this is our March 2023 Planning and Zoning Committee meeting. Before we get started tonight, we want to welcome some new members to the committee tonight. We have, as new members, we have Lynn Molston. Lynn, you can wave a hand, or we want to welcome Lynn. And then we have Jared Zern as a new member. And then as a new associate member, we have Tim McGuckin. So we had like a members orientation meeting last Monday. It went extremely well. I appreciate some of the other committee members joining in just to listen in, and I thought that was that was really good. So listen, but
Rob, it's Mike. Just wanted to know, we also have Angelica Jennings on to take notes for us today too.
Yes. Yes. So I don't see her yet on my screen's too small. So.
No, she's on here.
I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, Angelica, welcome.
Thank you.
So listen, just for the benefit of the group, let's do a really quick introduction just for the new members. Just tell a little bit about yourself and what got you on the committee. Let me start with Lynn.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Yep. So I was very pleased to be voted in. The thing that got me interested in joining Reston Planning and Zoning, I think the thing that weighted the most heavily on my decision was the work that I've done on the Reston Comprehensive Plan and working on the Land Use Committee. I think that having that kind of a background will really bring a lot to the committee, and I look forward to contributing and collaborating.
Thank you, Lynn. Jared.
Hello, everybody. Similar to Lynn, very happy to be part of this group. Quick background on myself. I am a licensed architect, but I no longer practice. I actually work with the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards in the nonprofit sector, helping to regulate architecture. So quick background, I've been in Reston only about 3 years, but I've been in Northern Virginia for probably about 15 total. So decided to get involved and sort of give back to the Reston community.
Thank you, Jared. And Tim.
Thank you. Really the same as Lynn and Jarrett. I've been a Restonian for about 9 or 10 years, Northern Virginian for about 30. I studied planning at Virginia Tech. I have a very strong interest in how, I think I said this at our orientation meeting, how people interact with their built environment, and how technology and policy can combine to improve our built environment. And also transportation is a personal interest. I've been involved in transportation technology and planning in my career. And like the others, I've enjoyed Reston, and I want to volunteer to, continue, work to preserve, the reasons we're all such fans of the area. So thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And Angelica, not to put you on the spot, but do you mind just giving us a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. So, I've lived in Reston for a year. I took an interest in planning and zoning. A few years ago, I studied business in college, and right now I work in contracts for Serco Inc. in Herndon. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so tonight we have two applications. Both of them are here really for the first time for their respective applications that are before us tonight. So basically, there's no voting tonight, but the first one is the Isaac Newton Square application. We've seen Isaac Newton in the past. They have an approved conceptual development plan. I think the last plan we had seen was some of their infrastructure plans, and now I think they're before us for one of their final development plans. So I guess representing them tonight, I see Fred. There's Andrew. Okay.
Hey,
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
Timing, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew.
All right. Thank you very much, Chair Walker, and good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Painter. I'm a zoning attorney at the law firm of Walsh Colucci. We have our entire team here this evening. Brian, I don't know if you have the ability to share your screen and
Sure.
bring up the what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a couple introductory remarks and then turn it over to Brian Szymanski with MV&A Architects to walk through the actual building. I think the last time that we met with you was back in July of last year. And at the time, we had a townhouse builder that was lined up for blocks W2, N1, and N3. And even though it was well vetted and it was almost fully, engineered, we were ready to pull the trigger and file the FDP for those 3 blocks. Of course, we all know what happened. Mortgage rates increase, construction costs increase, and unfortunately, the deal became untenable. But we still have productive conversations with them, and hopefully we'll be able to come back to you later this year after things settle down in the housing world. But since last July, we have been working anxiously on Block N2, where we recently filed an FDP a couple weeks back. And our first stop, obviously, was to provide this group with an introduction and show you what was filed. As you may recall, there were 3 buildings on the north side of Isaac Newton Square North. Those buildings, and it's kind of where Brian has his cursor, those 3 buildings have been demolished. And then what we're talking about is really what's outlined in red, and that's Block N2. And this would be Isaac Newton Square's first multifamily residential building. It's 7 stories, 90 feet tall, with 331 units. And for this design, we decided to keep the same team together. So Peter Lawrence Companies is the owner. Their master development partner is MRP, and Fred Rothmeyer is here. He can share a few words if he wishes. We have the same civil engineer, the same landscape designer with Oculus. And after several interviews, we brought on Brian Szymanski and his architecture firm at MV&A. They have a lot of experience in Arlington, DC, and in Reston, and we thought they would be a good fit with our unique plan and, frankly, our unique personalities, to be honest. If we can go through the next slide, Brian. Okay, right here. So for those who are new to P&Z, congratulations, I guess condolences, but congratulations mostly. This is Isaac Newton Square. It's 32 acres of Isaac Newton Square, the vast majority of it, about 68% of it or so. We received rezoning approval in October of 2019 to convert the site into a new mixed-use, predominantly residential neighborhood. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second, but it's basically 10 pedestrian-friendly development blocks, 2.8 million square feet of development, 2,100 dwelling units, all in line with the comprehensive plan's recommendations. So that was the rezoning and conceptual development plan, and that CDP was approved in 2019. Then we engaged an arborist and a landscape architect to monitor and maintain the willow oak trees. We engaged Kevin Tankersley, who's a certified arborist with Urban Limited, to provide a tree inventory and condition report. And then in September of 2021, we obtained approval for the first FDP for the project to really ready the blocks for vertical construction. There was no buildings were approved or anything like that. It was just setting where the future roads would go and carving up the northern part of Isaac Newton Square into different development blocks so that vertical construction can take place. And I'm sure Chair Walker has shared this with you, but when you have a planned development district, you have a rezoning and CDP that are approved, sort of setting forth the rules of the game. And then you have your final development plan that comes in later on in order to provide sort of teeth, and you sharpen your pencils and you actually design the building. So what's in front of this county right now is the FDP for the first block of vertical construction of N2. And the FDP is approved only by the Planning Commission. The CDP is approved by the Board of Supervisors. So we've got the CDP and rezoning done. Now we're looking at the first FDP for vertical construction. And sort of in yellow is kind of where we're at, which is we've been planning the FDP for block N2, and we filed it just a couple of weeks ago. So we can go to the next slide. So for those who were not around in 2019 and those who have sat through these sort of the summary before, you can do something else, I guess, for the next couple of seconds. But just to remind everyone of where we sort of been. When we first started designing this neighborhood, we really let the open space and the comprehensive plans grid network kind of guide the layout. So you see the grid, you see the development blocks. We also made the front door of the project down towards the southern end of the property, adjacent to the W&OD trail, where you'll see a full-size athletic field. We had to work with Nova Parks, FCDOT, and the Park Authority on how that project would interact with the W&OD trail. You also would see us embracing Reston's tradition of multi-generational livable communities and creating sort of a dynamic public realm. And to that end, we really worked hard to focus on the comprehensive plan's recommendation that this is a lower key, kind of quieter, more contemplative residential neighborhood that is meant to help drive the demand for ridership and retail and office and commercial uses that are closer to Metro. So this project is not meant to be town center. It's not meant to be Reston Station or even Midline. It's really meant to be sort of quieter. And you'll see on the next slide in a second that we are providing appropriate heights and densities that sort of taper down as one moves north away from the Metro Rail station. And so that's important. We also work with staff on a variety of sort of placemaking and streetscape activation elements. And then the last and biggest focus that we spent the most time on really was to find a way to create meaningful open spaces to provide a framework around the preservation of the site's mature willow oak trees. If you go out there today, and you can see it on this rendering, there's sort of a square of willow oaks that we spent a great deal of time designing this project around and then preserving as well. But there's 5 other open spaces as well that we've worked hard on, and we'll talk about one of them this evening. We can go to the next slide. As it pertains to block N2, okay, so this is at the northern end of the property. The CDP envisions this block being developed with a 7-story multifamily residential building with a target gross floor area of about 340,000 square feet and 290 units with heights between 60 and 90 feet. So that's kind of the baseline. If you also look in the CDP, we built in a lot of flexibility to be able to respond to market demand. So the number of stories within individual blocks in the project can be increased or decreased as long as the CDP's maximum and minimum building heights are honored. And then the amount of gross floor area and consequently the number of units within each block can also be moved around. Again, as long as the minimum and maximums are met. And of course, if you increase things in one block, you have to decrease them elsewhere so that it all balances out in the end. If we can go to the next, one before we go to that. So our design approach on this obviously was number one, to follow that CDP layout, the access points, the use and the massing. We wanted to retain the willow oaks, obviously along Isaac Newton Square North. We really wanted this to be a catalyst project for placemaking. This is going to be, we've torn down all the buildings, and as you come in off of Wheelie Avenue, we want this to kind of be sort of a wow kind of factor, but really a catalyst for the other blocks. If we can go to the next slide. This is an aerial view of Isaac Newton Square looking from north to south. So in the foreground, you can see block N2, and it backs up to open space and mature trees. You can see the existing Hidden Creek golf course to the right where the cursor is. And then you can see in the background Reston Station and the toll road. So you see sort of how it builds up as you move towards the metro station. So this is a composite image of what was approved by the board about 3 years ago. And we've been working to implement them. And I will say too that a lot of the effort has been spent on preserving views to the trees to the north, and then for those townhouse blocks, the views across the golf course as one looks west. They are wonderful views. If we can go to the next slide. So this is the CDP. This is what was approved, kind of the, no offense to the civil engineers, but this is what governs. It's not the rendered site plan, but this is what governs. This is the law affecting the property, right? The CDP here shows 2 possible vehicular and loading entrance locations for Block N2. One is along future Center Street, and Brian, you can sort of point where the cursor is where the little arrows are. And then one is along the future northern extension of Isaac Newton Square East. And then we also committed to something called an active corridor site plan, which we don't have a copy of, I don't think, in this presentation, but it basically demarcates the location of possible streetscape activation uses. So right at the intersection of Isaac Newton Square North and Isaac Newton Square East, that is where the cursor is. That is where the CDP says the main building lobby should be. And that's exactly where we've located it. And then right along Isaac Newton Square North and up Center Street and on the northern side of the property, it calls for having some sort of unit entrances or patios or balconies to promote activation on the street level and on the northern side where Nature's Edge Park is. We can go to the next slide. This is an image of what was approved back in September of 2021. This was our road and infrastructure plan. Again, we spent a lot of time, and a lot of the credit goes to P&Z for forcing us to rethink how we were doing things. But we spent a lot of time and effort on the preservation of those willow oak trees, where the on-street parking would be, where the stormwater management features would be, and more. So this is what was approved. No buildings were approved with it. This is just the first kind of road and infrastructure FCP that carved up this area into developable blocks. And just to talk about the willow oaks, I think it's pretty clear that they are a defining element of this entire development. And we have identified pretty much all of them for preservation in our landscaping plans. We are holding the existing building zone and the curb line. And in some areas, if you drill down into it, we've actually moved the curb lines away from the willow oaks. And as I mentioned, the ownership has engaged a pretty reputable arborist. They've been monitoring and maintaining those willow oaks for the past 2 years. There are a series of proffered commitments dealing with survivability, tree preservation, pedestrian paths, and how those are to be sited and more that we've committed to in the proffers as well. And I can go into more details on that if you like. If we can go to the next slide. And so here is sort of images of what Willow Oak Park would look like. Obviously, this is one block of many blocks, but you can sort of see kind of the thought that's gone into it and where our head is at as far as designing those. Anything that we do would have to be field located with the park authority and with our landscape arborist and more. We can go to the next slide. The last thing I'm going to say before I turn it over to Brian, on the front side, obviously, is Willow Oak Park of Block N2. And on the back side is something that we call Nature's Edge Park. Nature's Edge Park is a 3.3 linear acre linear park that would run along the northern and western boundary of this, again, against the adjacent foliage and the golf course. But it's really meant to provide passive and active recreational opportunities with pathways and boardwalks and that sort of thing, but really to take advantage of the views and to provide sort of a more contemplative area. As it pertains to Block N2, the main elements of Nature's Edge Park are, number one, it's sort of shown in red, a fenced dog park area, and then a fenced sport court area. And when we laid everything out, this is from the CDP, it's very regimented, right? It's like, we're going to site design this and impose our will on nature. As we've gone through the landscaping design of this, we've made changes to it. We've made changes to the ends of both Center Street and Isaac Newton Square East. We've made changes to Nature's Edge Park. We've run it by, had meetings with staff and Commissioner Carter and Supervisor Alcorn. And I think everyone kind of agrees that it makes more sense not to be so regimented here, but provide sort of a superior experience, which we'll walk you through. I'm going to turn it over to Brian for the next slide, but I think you will see that what we strive to do is to have architecture that is designed to have a variety in massing and articulation. We don't want to have radical architectural contrast between this block and what may come on both sides, but we also wanted to have facade materials that are similar in tone and design to some of Reston's earliest buildings. And we spent a lot of time with MVNA on that. So Brian, why don't you take it from here?
Of course. Thanks, Andrew. And again, my name is Brian Szymanski with MVNA Architects. I'm really thrilled to get the opportunity to speak with you today and share this development of Block N2 from a CDP footprint that we were looking at earlier into a real building. We're very excited about this building, and we think this first phase is going to really set a high standard for development for all the future buildings on the site. When we began looking at this site, we analyzed a number of parking and site arrangements. That was kind of the first step we did, and we settled fairly quickly on a condition where we have a precast parking structure fully wrapped on all sides with residential units. So at no point on the exterior of this building can you see that parking structure, and that allowed us a nice interior open courtyard. We moved that parking structure around, and this west side of the building is where we located that parking structure. I'd like to start with just a refresher of the topography and how the building is sited, and then we're going to walk clockwise around the building and talk through it. So to the south of the street, the grade is at its highest, and it quickly slopes down from there and slopes as we move north. To respond to this grade, we've lifted up the building on the south side up more towards the level of the street. And as the grade falls, as it moves north, the first floor of this falls along with it. So it kind of stays close to that grade. And then as we wrap around the building, we are providing stoops and balconies and walkout units to help make that connection from interior to exterior. We studied a number of different locations for the front door, that main lobby. We ultimately settled on the southeast corner of the building. We think the visibility there is strongest, as most people are going to visit this from that southeast corner. And also this location, the lobby, will give a great connection when you move in the front door into the courtyard and internal amenities of the project. The problem with the lobby here was the way Isaac Newton East what was shown in the CDP. It really just was a dead end here, and it felt quite unfinished, and it wasn't a great introduction to this important Nature's Edge open space to this project. So what we did, and a quick shot of that, how that looked, it was just a dead end here. So the way we addressed that was we added a drop-off condition at the end of it here. So the main corner is still pedestrian oriented in nature. You know, that's where people will walk, come and go. But somebody dropping off or picking somebody up can turn down Isaac Newton Square East, and there'll be a turnaround, and they can pick up and drop off and leave and enter into the same lobby piece. And we think this is also a great introduction, kind of a threshold to the Nature's Edge Park, as opposed to this where you come down and oops, how do I turn around and whatnot. So I think that's a really great improvement to the plan that we're very excited about. I'm going to wrap around to the south side of the project and look at the Willow Oaks. I'm going to kick it over to Don Hoover from Oculus to speak to this.
Good evening, everyone. So this is a photograph of the front of our site along Isaac Newton Square North, and these are the existing Willow Oaks, which has been stated several times. It's really was the plan defining element when we first started master planning this site, and it's been important to staff. It's important. I know it's important to you all. But perhaps most of all, it's important to us because it really sets our project apart from other developments. But as you can see, the grading in front of our block is probably the most challenging on the whole project, where the grade drops down about 6 or 7 feet from the curb. And when you're trying to save trees, one of the things that you can't do is disturb the roots, and probably the most harmful would be to suffocate the roots by filling that full of soil. So when we are planning our building, we really need to maintain all of those grades. And of course, we want to have street sidewalks, but as you can see from this view, putting a sidewalk along the curb would be virtually impossible. And so we came up with another idea for that. Next slide. So this is the section through our proposal. The first thing I'll draw your attention to is the build to line in the CDP, which is there in red. We decided as part of this effort to set the building back an additional, I think it's 10 feet, just to pull everything back away from the willow oaks. And then what you're seeing where there's a person walking a dog, that's what the public sidewalk, which ties into the sidewalk network for the rest of the project. So we pulled everything back, lifted it up so it was closer to street grade, and then we maintained, you know, the protecting the root system of the trees. And so from the building, there may be stoops or planting zones right outside the building, and then you got your public sidewalk. Next slide. And this is just a view of that solution and condition. And Brian, you may want to say a bit more about the building here.
Sure. Yeah, we'll get more into the exterior later in the presentation, but we've made a real attempt to break down the scale of this portion and have a strong base to it and activate it with stoops, with balconies, with nice human scaled windows, with really high quality materials. Brick is shown right here, and make this a really pleasant experience an activated experience to walk along. We're going to keep rotating around to the west side of the building. And here I want to talk about the loading and parking entrances. We wanted to keep the loading and parking entrances away from our new front door drop off and that front door to Nature's Edge. And we similarly wanted to keep parking and loading away from the entry point to Nature's Edge on the west higher up here. So we decided to align that parking and loading curb cuts with this adjacent curb cut to the west and locate that mid block. And that allows us to provide an activated corner and activated edge to Nature's Edge. And it really has a minimal impact to the site across the street for the future development. There is a separation between these two curb cuts that allows a pedestrian refuge in between for somebody walking along that sidewalk there. Continuing north, we're going to talk to the north side of the building and look at Nature's Edge now.
So what you're looking at right now is the approved CDP plan, and you can see the dog exercise area, the sports court, and a passive lawn. And we've maintained that program. But what we've done here, you've got a dual walkway, one walkway against the building, and then a walkway, the main pathway out against the forest. And you'll see when we go to the next slide that those have been concentrated. The other bit from the previous slide at the end of Isaac Newton Square East is a overlook. And when we really started studying that, the overlook was really overlooking the street more than anything else. And so we made a change there as well, which you'll see on the next slide. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is the new proposed plan. You can see the multi-use path now is been located between the building and the recreational space, the sports court and dog exercise area, which is located, you know, on Center Street. We've been able, as a result of eliminating that second pathway, to make those spaces a bit more generous. And then you can see that we located the overlook with the sports court and dog exercise area instead of being over on Isaac Newton Square East. And from there, you got views down into the forest as well as glimpses through to the golf course. Also on the plan, you'll see that similar to what Brian described at the Isaac Newton Square East, we're also putting a turnabout for the same reason that, you know, so that people aren't stuck at the end of the street trying to do a 3-point turn. Go to the next slide. So this is just a close-up of that active rec spaces. And in the bottom left, you can see that the approved CDP dog park was 5,530 square feet. We're now at 7,825 feet, which is much more appropriate. this is going to be the main dog exercise area for the whole development. So having it of appropriate size is important. And then just some glimpses of what those program elements would look like. Next slide. And then this is the view with the multi-purpose pathway to the right, and then the sports court, the overlook in the background, and then the dog park, the fenced-in dog park at the top of the screen. And then there's also passive lawn space to the bottom of the screen. So that's kind of where we landed on Nature's Edge.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about the exterior of the building. We studied this exterior of the building in a number of ways, and we ultimately decided on an approach that splits the building into two architectural treatments for the east and west side of the building. However, this is mostly addressed in color, so the building still holds together as a singular architectural expression while utilizing a color approach that breaks down the overall scale and experience of the building. Here's our southeast corner with the trees on, and here I'm going to turn them off just so you can get a better view of the building. But again, you could see these 100-foot tall willow oak trees, just how much of a presence they have. In all these views, we're going to turn off all the trees so you can see the building a little better. But every streetscape around this, has either the willow oaks or great trees. So we can see here a really strong corner element that anchors the main lobby to the building, that has tall double height windows that signal the importance of this corner and it invites you into the building. This red expression continues horizontally down the facade, but is broken vertically with bays at a regular rhythm that are reinforced with breaks in the roof line as well. Further down the facade, we see that the color treatment of the facade changes to support a symmetrical expression. The exterior is set back, providing visual relief and opportunities for huge terraces on the lowest units. For the body of the building, we utilize a double height window expression for an opening to trick the eye into perceiving the building into being shorter than it actually is. You perceive the building perhaps as, say, 5 stories as opposed to its true 7 stories. At the south elevation here, we can see that split approach that breaks the building into 2 smaller scaled compositions. Again, popped out bays, inset balconies, that both provide articulation and a human scale to the facade. We have a strong reading of base, middle, and top, which further provides scale to the composition. We're going to wrap around to the southwest corner. Again, we see that strong brick corner treatment that marks the prominence of an important corner on the site. And this side, we have a more regular rhythm of balconies that relates to the scale of potential townhouses across the street here. Now we're back at the northwest corner near the dog park. We get back to our lighter coloration from the southwest corner. And again, we see popped out balconies and bays that have great exterior spaces with incredible views to the north. Continuing to rotate around the north side of the building, we can see that we've shifted back to the red color of the east building. So again, we have that split east and west expression. Now we're going to continue wrapping around to the east, and this is a residential drop-off area that's supported by the main lobby, double height glazing there. Between these 2 end caps here, we have this glassy hyphen element where the indoor corridor is brought along the exterior face of the building for an exciting moment that connects the interior and the exterior spaces and really helps animate the facade. So residents walking along the corridors, they'll be able to catch views out to Nature's Edge to the north, and then people here will be able to look in and see movement across the facade there. At the base, we have ample glazing which will allow views into interior amenity spaces. We'll zoom in here of the entrance, where the left side is more of a pedestrian entrance. The right side is where somebody can come and go adjacent to this drop off, but it's all unified by a continuous canopy and really grand double height glazing. We're going to continue wrapping around to the Willow Oak Park. We see that nice walkway adjacent to these beautiful trees. Again, this approach protects the trees and their roots. Walk-up units and balconies along the base provide activation to this path, and building articulation helps create a comfortable pedestrian scale along the path. Again, we're really excited about this first phase of this project. We're confident we're setting a very high bar for future development on the site. We welcome your comments. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. Fred, I don't know if you wanted to have any closing remarks before we open it up to questions.
Yeah, I would say we worked hard on providing a building of quality and putting our best foot forward. So we hope that this is well received, and we hope that we're able to get this first phase with the 3 blocks pushed forward probably somewhere end of next year.
All right, Chair Walker, I think that concludes our presentation.
Yeah, thanks. So listen, before we start taking some questions, and let me ask the members, if you have some comments, try to use the raising of your hand in the chat. It'll be helpful. But Andrew, I think it'd be helpful. It's oftentimes we don't see just FDP only plans where they're often combined with the CDP. And so for the members and the committee benefit, maybe you could remind us on a few, major key issues, where the development stands, for example, for Reston Association, where they stand about stormwater management, some of the real big key issues, recreation, active recreation, and then just give us a sense of your filings with the county and kind of exactly where that stands. I mean, Fred just said, looking at, end of next year, but it just to give us a little bit of sense of that timing.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the opener, so the FDP is really to implement what the board approved with the CDP and the rezoning, right? So the rules of the game, kind of the guardrails of everything that we do from here on out have to be in conformance with the approved rezoning and CDP. So the FDP that was proposed here is to implement what was approved. If there's anything else that we need to change, if we want to change the heights or the uses or anything like that, it requires an amendment to the CDP and the rezoning. So this is just implementing now, the rules of the game that were set forth in the October 2019 rezoning approval. You had asked about Reston Association membership. Proffer 11F does require the ownership to negotiate in good faith to join RA. And we look forward to having those discussions. I'm not sure if Larry Butler with RA is here. He and I have been trading emails back and forth about trying to get a meeting on another project. And this obviously would be one of the things that we would be talking about as well. So that's that. In terms of stormwater management, we spent a lot of time talking about stormwater. And I don't know if Pete Crawford is online. I think he is. But no stormwater management obviously is provided on the site today. There's obviously an extensive amount of impervious space, pervious area. And we have agreed to upgrade the site to meet both the public facilities manual and the stormwater management ordinance. But we further committed to meet the Reston specific stormwater management goals, which includes meeting a 25% reduction for the 2-year 24-hour storm in both peak runoff and rate and volume. And Pete knows all of this, but we're above a 1.0 FAR total. And so there's sort of a numerical goal that we have to meet under sort of new development regulations. There's a whole spreadsheet that tells us what our requirement's going to be with each one of these. If you look at the center of the project, there is sort of a yellowish path that meanders through the site. That's called the Rain Garden Meander. And that is supposed to be sort of an east-west environmental pedestrian livability spine that seeks to integrate the project's stormwater management into our overall open space concept. So, we thought greatly about stormwater retention, quality improvements, infiltration and groundwater recharge, and more. But Pete, I don't know if you want to speak specifically to Block N2 and what we're doing there for stormwater.
Sure. So I'll just quickly go over it. So Andrew mentioned early on that we have an infrastructure plan. With that infrastructure plan, we actually proposed the stormwater management and BMP for what we call this entire north phase 1 section of the site. So the stormwater components are underground detention. We have three separate underground detention vaults because the water discharges from the site in a couple of different areas. And then we have manufactured filtering devices associated with each one of those detention structures that are downstream of those. We're also proposing urban bioretention in select areas along the street where it made sense. And when I say make sense, there's a lot of discussion about where to place them relative to parallel parking. And so we worked very hard with Commissioner Carter and Planning and Zoning with the infrastructure to place those. So that's the stormwater and water quality techniques that are currently being used to solve the stormwater for Block N2.
Thanks, Peter. All right, any questions from the committee? I don't see any hands raised.
And,
Chair,
Walker, if I could, oh, I'm sorry. If I could also say too, I think one of the things. So the FDP process, ultimately, this winds its way to after about 4 or 5 months of staff review. This will wind its way before the Planning Commission for a vote. And it's the Planning Commission again that approves FDPs in Fairfax County. It's not the Board of Supervisors. So I just wanted to say and we just started we haven't even received our first round of staff comments because we just submitted the application. So we're still in application acceptance, but we will be back before you, to let you know exactly what all those comments are as they're known and what our responses are going to be. So sorry to interject there.
Nope, perfectly fine. So let's go to William Pegues and then to Matt after William.
Okay, thank you. On your stormwater retention, how much of the water that falls on the building itself is retained there locally? That is, I'm trying to say where the stormwater retention tanks might be located for water that is falling on the roof of the building.
Peter, do you want to handle that one? If you know.
Yeah, it's to the north of the building. Between the northern edge of the building, yeah, right where the hand is, if you can see the hand, that's right.
Oh, okay. What if you can make that disappear? I mean, what you can do with a roof is a purple roof concept, which basically can act as the entire stormwater retention system, let you get rid of that tank or a large part of it for anything that falls on the roof of the building. In addition to that, and separate from it as an issue, is that, it brings in a vegetated roofing system, which is much more friendly to the environment. That also acts as the filtration system for the stormwater that is slowly released. You won't need the tank. The other thing is that what's being done, and we're seeing things happening more in the general region as well as in Reston, being the one that's getting it the first one in Northern Virginia, is urban agriculture on the roofs of the buildings. This is spreading greatly downtown in DC, where the buildings have either raised bed planters, or in some cases, the entire roof is turned into vegetated roofing that is doing agriculture. And they partner with a company that does that and is spreading into Northern Virginia now. And Fairfax County's Urban Agriculture Work Group has been working with them. One of the first areas that is putting it in, they're doing it on the ground. They're going to be moving it into the roofs, and that is Haley Rise in the Brookfield development. And their model is that they use a charity organization to distribute the food that is grown on the site, and also with a company that does all of the agricultural farming on the building at basically like landscape prices. So it's very economical. Some models have it where they're selling it to the residents of the building. But just to let you know that particular urban agriculture on a roof can also work very well with the purple roof concept, where you're getting rid of a large part, if not all, of the stormwater retention that's related to the roof of the building. That's it.
All right, thank you for that. I know that we have looked at green roof systems. We're also looking at albedo roofs, which are specifically designed to reduce internal building temperatures by reflecting the sun's UV rays back up. It is a wood frame building, and we do have concerns about the weight of holding water versus in a concrete or steel building, which doesn't move as much. But we'll take those comments back, and we will look at the Haley Rise stuff.
One of the interesting, well, yeah, Haley Rise is the same developer in his downtown offices. He has a more traditional roof, and what they use there are raised bed planters. So you can still get a lot of use out of it for urban agriculture using raised bed planters on a more conventional kind of roof, meaning it could be still a highly reflective roof. One of the things about the highly reflective roofs is that you're simply sending the heat back up into the air. It's like, where does it go? It goes back up. Whereas the vegetated roofing, it goes to the plants and they tend to hold it, but then they also shade the roof. And the plants, this might be something to look at, is that even just a small 6-inch high sedum on a day where the ambient air temperature is 72 and it's a bright sunshiny day, the temperature at the actual level of the soil is 71. On a white roof that's highly reflective, the temperature at the top of the membrane, which is basically the same location as far as insulation is concerned, is 110. So that might mean something different to you as relates to your HVAC systems and especially the top floor residential units.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too. I know, and Brian, I know that you focused on that more, but we do have a large amount of space that we need for the condenser units too. So I think let's look at that as well.
Right,
right.
and the vegetation lives in shade just fine that goes up on these places. So you might have a lot of equipment penetrations that going on up there, and they might become smaller, not the penetrations, but the actual units that are sitting up there. So I would think that could be beneficial to you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on and go to Matt, and then Richard Kennedy after Matt.
Well, I'll second that. Certainly done plenty of green roofs on wood frame buildings before. Maybe look at, I know you're probably not to the point where you're designing mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems yet, but VRF systems are efficient and can take up a lot less square footage on your roof plate than traditional condenser units. So that might be something to look at as well. I've got a couple questions. I'll start with kind of the site ones, and then we can move to the architecture. My first question regarding the site is, there was a section earlier in the presentation where you had pulled the sidewalk back to protect the root system of the trees, and it was sloping back down towards the building. Now, I know you guys have probably discussed it, but I didn't hear it in the presentation. What is it? What's the drainage solution for that condition? Because right now you've basically created a big swimming pool there on the side of the sidewalk.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time looking at that because you don't typically want to drain the water towards your building.
Slope it away from the building.
Yeah, so it is. If you were to go east-west, this section is cut north-south. It does drop along the building, and on Isaac Newton Square east, there's a way for the water to get out. And we're also going to need to put in extra drains along that edge, probably built into the wall to pick up, because it is, we made it hard on ourselves, but it was really we really didn't have a choice if we wanted to save the trees, and we really wanted to save the trees.
Understood.
Yeah.
Just curious what your thoughts were, but I'm sure you've discussed it. My next question is related to the park area to the north of the site. Are all of those amenities, the dog park, the basketball court, the lawn, are all those going to be accessible to the public, or are those specific for the people that are going to be living in this building or this development?
Those are all a part of, those are all publicly accessible. They'll all be placed under a public access easement.
Great.
It's only the areas that are interior to the building itself that would be open, that would have amenities.
Sure.
And I'll just say too, for the amenities, we are required to spend $1,900 per unit on on-site amenities. So that could be gym stations, that could be, tot lots, that could be dog run areas, all interior, pools, conference facilities, that sort of thing. Those would be open, obviously, to the residents, but everything
Sure.
else around it would be open to the public.
All right, that's wonderful. Happy to hear that. Let's flip to really any of your 3D renderings in the package. It's not really important which one. That'll be fine. So this is a 7-story building. So this is a question for MV&A. Is this a 2-story podium with a 5-story Type 3 wood building on top? Is that what you guys are thinking?
You got
here?
it. Dead on. Exactly. Yep.
Well, that's what that's probably what I would have done if they wanted 7 stories. So, okay, so it is a wood structure. I like the design. I appreciate the color palette. I think it's very in tune with kind of the traditional Reston color palette, brick, earth toned materials. I like how you've sort of broken up pieces of the facade. So the building, on a sort of linear, it starts to break it up in a linear fashion. My concern, and this is kind of an overarching concern for the site, but looking at the overall master plan for the site, this is a really important site because it's a transition between, very, very high density as we get closer to the metro station. I mean, 300-foot tall buildings. And then it's transitioning down and it's stepping down back to the residential neighborhoods, surrounding the golf course there. So looking at what's been approved, I know you've got a range of how you can set the heights of all these different buildings, and you sort of have a FAR that you can distribute throughout the site. My charge or my suggestion, what I would love to see is to take as much of that density, and I know we're just talking about one block and one building right now, and try to push that towards the metro station as much as we can to create that step down effect as we get back to the row houses. I mean, even in this rendering right here, I do have a little bit of a concern with the scale difference between those row houses. And I don't know if those are 2/2s that are maybe 4 stories tall, or if they're more traditional row houses that are 3 stories tall. But there is a pretty large scale difference between a 7-story building on one side of a street and a 3-story row house on the other. It's not impossible, which gets to kind of my next point, which if we go back to one of the architectural renderings.
Yes.
I think, I mean, it's something to talk about and study, but you're already sort of doing it with your top floor by creating that gray color palette and kind of keeping the articulation of the building and the color variety down one floor. But I actually think taking that top floor and stepping it back a little bit would really help to break the scale down of this even more and would make it feel more comfortable adjacent to those row houses there. So I haven't looked at your plans enough to kind of know sort of how the layout works, but I do think that stepping that penthouse floor back and kind of creating, a more of a penthouse type feel would help to break this mass down and make it feel a little bit more compatible to me with those proposed row houses there. I think that's all I've got. Overall, I like the color palette and the architecture, and I think it's simple but sophisticated and works pretty well for the surrounding context here.
Yeah, thank you. And
Yeah.
Brian, can you go back to sort of the can you go back to like the rendered site plan up at the top?
Sure.
Just to give everyone sort of a scale or sort of a sense. Yeah, that one's good. So block N2 is between 60 and 90 feet in height. The one that's next to it, N1 against Wheelie Avenue, that's between 70 and 140 feet. So where the cursor is, if you just go to the right there, yeah, right there. So that's 70 to 140 feet. And then the whole row, that's the next set down. Those are between 140 and 160 feet, and then it jumps up, and the next one is 2. And then right by the athletic field, that goes up to 200 feet. So that's sort of the step down as it goes. And so we're between 60 and 90, which I think is the second lowest of all the heights that have been approved here. And the 2 end blocks are approximately 50 feet or so.
I know that's what
35.
you guys. Sorry, I know that's what you've been approved for. I mean, and I saw the diagram here, but I'm looking at it kind of more holistically, which is, yeah, you could build up to 90, but is it appropriate to build up to 90 there when, you know, if this is something that's not that far away from single family homes that are 1 story? So that's kind of what I'm talking about as far as breaking it down. I mean, I understand that there is a step down, you know, zoning wise coming back, but I'm asking, you know, you as architects and designers to think about that and think about how this kind of feels as you're coming down Wheelie and you're kind of moving back into those single family home neighborhoods. And I am aware that there's other buildings, apartment buildings that are on the other side of Wheelie there that, you know, that are in that range of 6, 7 stories. So I'm not saying, you know, this is absolutely like a non-starter for me. I want to be sensitive to the fact that this is that sort of transition piece that's making that step down back into the sort of single family home neighborhoods. So that's all I'm kind of saying.
Right. Yeah, no, I think we can look at that. Thank you very much.
All right, let's move on to Richard Kennedy, then David and Sue.
Thank you. I was going to say something about the height of the buildings and the idea of phasing it down, but I think Matt covered it much better than I would. So I'd be interested in the treatment of that. But I wouldn't be pushing it because I think what you're talking about may be appropriate. I would also like to re-endorse our person that is so knowledgeable in special roofs. And what's really important is to pay attention to what he's asking you to consider, because this is relatively early in this development, and you've got the time to address that. I think that's very important. Last point I have is it really struck out to me that there was going to be a very nice dog exercise. I think you mentioned it 7 or 8 times. I hope, I'm not against dogs, and I know they need to be fit in someplace, but I hope we're not doing it at the expense of little children and teenagers and other people, seniors walking around that would have some recreational opportunities and a sense of it other than just a ball court. So please think that out, and because I think these, particularly for young children, is very important. That's all I have tonight. Thank you.
I'll just quickly chime in on that. And, you know, Nature's Edge Park, which wraps around the whole development, there is a section where there's a children's play, and then there's you know, some open lawn spaces. I guess we just happen to be hitting the block that has the dog park, and we really need to have the entire thing built out so that, you know, there's something for everybody in this. It's just that this phase of the project happens to have the dog park in it. But it's a good point to try to make sure we're, you know, including everybody and having things for everybody of all ages and abilities. And we totally, you know, agree with you on that.
Let me just add one point, given what you've said, and that's very realistic, is that how much do you want to concentrate an area for dogs? Might it not be spread out a little more? That would be useful. Just a thought. Thank you.
All right, let's go to David and Sue, and then Mike Jennings.
Thank you for Andrew and perhaps Fred. I reviewed your materials when they first arrived, and I frankly do not recall what you were committing to for affordable housing and for workforce housing. Could you describe your position on that?
Sure. Yeah. So we in the comprehensive plan's recommendations, in line with the comprehensive plan's recommendations, we have a minimum of 13.5% of all units being provided as WDUs. And then during the zoning process, we lowered the AMI threshold so that they're split evenly between 70, 80, and 100% AMI. And I think for this one, correct me if I'm wrong, Fred, but the total number of units, WDUs, would be 47 WDUs in this building.
Yeah, if that's 13.5%, that's right. And 25% is at 70% AMI, 25 at 80, and 50 at 100.
Okay, thank you very much. But you are not doing affordable housing, is that correct? Just workforce?
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I would say overall, you've done a very, very thoughtful approach to integrating this building and its design features and its color palette with the surrounding nature area. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does Sue have any comments?
No, just especially agreeing with the last comment that Dave made. Also, how it integrates and reflects traditional architecture in Reston, and yet it has this contemporary feel, which we appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Mike Jennings and then on to John Coppola.
Yeah, hi. I don't have any questions. I'm only wanted to chime in as Dave and Sue just did. I really like this plan, this design, you know, the amount of park and dog space and recreation, things that commonly we don't get any of, is fantastic. And I really like the articulation on the buildings, as at least they're shown now. You know, I'm getting tired of these spreadsheet facades, as I've heard them now called. It just looks like an Excel spreadsheet with a few lines, you know, the grid lines darkened in. And this is a nice job of you know, at least sprucing that up a bit. So just
Never heard that one. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys. That's it.
All right, John, then we'll go to Tim McGuckin.
Hi, good evening. It's looking pretty good. I have two questions. One about stormwater. Just question about whether or not you're able to meet the Reston comprehensive plan for stormwater. And then number two, I would love to hear a summary from Kevin on your transportation and how you're meeting the goals of the county there.
Yeah, so I think I may have mentioned this earlier. We did commit to meeting the 25% reduction for the 2-year 24-hour storm in both peak runoff and rate volume in order to meet the Reston specific stormwater management goals. Pete, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, but that's we did commit to doing that, and we're going to do that here.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. So it's an overall comprehensive plan for the entire site. There are alternative means to meeting that goal that we worked out with county staff, which are reducing the runoff to a good forested condition, which is essentially reducing it as far as you can go, where certain volume goals can't be met. So there's a combination of different techniques that we're doing. It was deemed to meet the goals of the comp plan when we went through the zoning. So we are meeting the goals. To say that we're putting like a specific percentage on the reduction, there is a goal to do that over the course of the whole site. And so for this particular phase, we are not at 20% or 25%, but when we factor in the rain garden meander and later phases where the athletic park is and where more pervious surfaces get introduced, that's where the percentages start to rise for the overall entire development.
At that stage, will you be able to meet the full comprehensive plan goals?
Well, that's the intent, yes.
That's what we committed to.
Yes, that's what we committed to. That's right.
So you will be able to meet it 100% fully?
At this
Pete, I
point,
think
that's the projection, yes.
good enough.
Go
Great,
ahead,
thank
Andrew.
you.
And then, John, I think you had also asked for some information about transportation. Grove Slade is actually our traffic consultant. I don't think we've got anyone from Grove Slade on here this evening. I could be wrong, but if we can, we can respond separately to any comments you may have or have an offline discussion with you. I'm sorry we don't have anyone from Grove Slade here with us this evening.
I'm sorry. I was looking at the next one when I said Kevin. Sorry.
We love
Yeah,
Kevin
just
too.
curious how you were accommodating transportation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if, as far as the loading, we have a turnaround area on Isaac Newton Square East, and then we have the parking in the garage along Center Street and the loading on Center Street as well. But Brian, I don't know if there's anything more to add about it as far as traffic goes or like loading.
Yeah, I mean, the improvements we made to Isaac Newton Square East were specific to allow a relief of traffic, and part of why we located the lobby here. We have ability to people to get off of Isaac Newton Square North, not try and block any lanes and do their drop-offs, Amazon, things like that. If there's anything quick or DoorDash that needs to happen quickly, we can get them out of the way of that there. But that's the small scale look on traffic. The larger scale things, yeah, let's have Grove Slade speak to that.
All right, let's go on to Tim and then Tam.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, thank you for recognizing my interest in the question. This is my very first meeting. I've enjoyed it. I think the design is as beautiful as Mike said. It's fantastic, and we're getting things that we don't normally have everywhere in Reston. So I want to commend the team here for this design. And I think John stole a little bit of my thunder because I do have some questions about traffic and a few things. Pick up and drop off. This is a fairly tight urban environment. Varieties of people. People like a guy like me just walking or running, person with a stroller, families, bicycles, personal cars, delivery vehicles. They all have to share that space. And looking at my son's bank account, since I still get access to it, I see he does a lot of DoorDash, right?
Yeah.
So by general, not more than I think is prudent, but that's young people, right? And so it's like a three-part question. What are your thoughts on curb space management? You have designated zones, there's time-based restrictions, there's even pricing mechanisms that you could use to help really efficiently manage the curb space along all of these streets. The other thing I'm concerned about, even in my own neighborhood, are the Amazon vans driving down at 30 miles an hour in a 10-mile-per-hour zone. So what are your thoughts on traffic calming? There's been an uptick in the last 2 years of pedestrian deaths due to just interactions with vehicles. Vehicle designs are getting taller. The SUVs are getting taller and they're killing more people. And then signage. I was just thinking about the Uber pickups. Is there any way for an Uber driver to know that, hey, I'm on the northwest corner of this building? Any thoughts or ideas to help making navigating these blocks easier for the delivery of people and dinner? Just some thoughts there. I know you have the transportation guys not here, but this is the topics that I'm interested in professionally, is the movement of goods and people around this system, and how you consider the management of valuable curb space when there's multiple competing uses for it, shared with people and bicycles. Thank you.
Brian or Pete, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that at all.
Yeah, a lot of that I think, Grove Slade would need to answer. I think one unique condition we have here, a lot of people will be coming from the east, and Isaac Newton Square North does not have on-street parking on that on the east on the north side, but as you're coming down the road, your right side. And I do think when you're coming down and you see, we hope that the front door of this is pretty evident with that long canopy that will have signage opportunities. And then as you look, that's when you'll be able to see on-street parking spaces and that drop off. And I think there'll be a lot of visual cues to use this small portion of the road for that type of movement. The fact that it has this turnaround, this kind of dead end condition, and you can see it as soon as you turn in, immediately you know you can't start flying down this road. You're gonna hopefully make that right turn and go very slowly around that space. And that's why we've set up this condition and to allow vehicles a way to turn around when they move down there. So we're hopeful that will facilitate some of the things you spoke to as far as how we actually sign or manage the actual on-street spaces. I think we need to, I think Grove Slade can speak to that better than we can here. And maybe there's some more thought we need to put into that as well.
I'll echo a bit of what Brian said. This is exactly why we're creating that turnabout at the end of Isaac Newton Square East, such that you could have your Ubers and Lyfts basically drop people off. That's where you're seeing the car that's behind the cars that you see parked here, where it says Isaac Newton apartment. And those spaces would be temp spaces for, your food delivery, FedEx trucks to come up. So we absolutely have been talking about it, how packages would go into the lobby and back out. So that's why we have created what we have created. As Brian said, there's no on-street parking on the northern side of Isaac Newton Square North. There is on the south. And what I envision is that it would all be signed. There would be signage such that there would not be long-term parking, but most of the street parking is all visitor, such that everybody else basically find their way into the garage.
Well, and Fred, that was one of the reasons that we consolidated the loading entrances and the visitor and resident parking entrance to Isaac or to Center Street, and to get it away from that more that more sort of loading specific drop off area on Isaac Newton Square East.
You'll have people at that. Okay, you'll have people at that northwest corner saying, "I'm at the turnabout. Bring my DoorDash there." That will happen. People aren't going to walk all the way across 500 feet to that front if they live on that far corner. I'm just pointing that out. So
yeah,
I was just
you're
thinking
probably
of,
right, and there's parking spaces there as well.
High schools have all these doors.
You can't control the entire world either.
You can't. No, you can't. So I mean, like I pick up my daughter at door 4, and it's very helpful because there's 6 doors and that school is huge. So I know door 4, right? Things like that.
What we'll get back to you and on curbside utilization, because where the cursor is right now, as Fred said, there is on-street parking, and obviously we do not want our residents to park there. So
No.
there are techniques that we can use, which you talked about, signage, towing, those types of things that can be used to enforce shorter term parking. So we'll get back to you on that.
And
I really
Andrew
appreciate
offered
that,
his
guys.
towing
Thank
service
you.
up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing my questions.
Sure.
Hey, Rob, before we move on, that's a great conversation, and just a couple things that I've seen that we've at least studied on a couple jobs that I've worked on recently are, things like dedicated Uber waiting areas, transit screens in lobbies. They give like pickup times and, tell you the weather and when the next metro train's coming and things like that. Those are really cool. Amazon package lockers. And we've also been studying doing like some heated and cooled lockers for food delivery and grocery delivery and things like that, that even if I don't know if it solves sort of the outside turnaround problem, but at least it gives sort of a central place where those people can come in, they can drop something off really quickly and then get out of there, rather than having to sort of cycle through the whole building. So
Absolutely.
just a couple things to think about.
Yeah,
Agreed. We do them on all our buildings. So
Yeah, I was just going to say a lot of the urban apartments don't have those techniques. So let's move on to Tammy and then Jared.
Thank you. A couple of items Andrew, it's good to see you. However, with our virtual plans, we got no proffers or justification sheets. And just want you to know that. I see the sign apartments. Are these all rental units?
Yes, they will
Correct.
be all, yeah, that's correct. They'll be all rental units, and we will be providing the full proffers and, happy to provide the full proffers and the statement of justification to you. I can send that to you separately, Tammy, but also the next time that we see you, since this was just for information purposes, we didn't think to send them, but we're happy to include them with our next appearance
Okay.
before you.
So I'm going to be asking you some questions that'll be annoying because I didn't get to see those. What is the bedroom breakdown of this building? 1, 2, 3 studio, do you know?
Brian?
Yeah, it was leaning mostly about 2/3 one bedroom, 1/3 two bedrooms, more or less. And there are some studios in there as well. But that's roughly it. 1/3
So
ones,
so
2/3.
you realize that is the formula that the 100% of the rest of Reston is using, and that's why we have empty apartments? I mean, I just want you to be aware of that. That emphasis on 1 bedroom mostly and 2 bedroom, a third, is not necessarily a formula for success, in that we have an abundance of that product already in Reston that's not being rented. So please, please think about that. What happened to the block between this thing and Wheelie? Last we got together, maybe the financing has changed everything, but you were talking about a huge height thing. Last we talked, you were doing, instead of senior housing assisted living on this block, you had flipped it to 2/2s. Now you're talking about something that's 140 feet high. That's not a 2/2.
No. When we appeared before you last June or July, that is what we were proposing for that site. It would take an amendment to the concept development plan, the conceptual development plan. And what I was referring to what is approved on the site today. So it's between 70 and 140 feet high, if memory serves. And you're right, that was supposed to be the sort of the senior living one. But where we were before you last June, we had been proposing townhomes or 2/2s on that site.
Thank you. Okay, I thought I had lost my marbles. All right.
No.
How wide is the boardwalk that you're putting in on the south side of this building, N2? How wide is that boardwalk?
Pete, go ahead, Tom, sorry.
I believe it's 8 feet, although, yeah.
Because that's going to have pedestrians, scooters, hopefully not bicycles, people going 2 ways and strollers, people with dogs, etc. So please, 8 feet would be minimal. And I know you have I commend you for your treatment of the tree roots and not piling stuff on them and keeping them alive. What happened also on your plan, when we first talked to you, you were keeping the 2 twin office buildings on Wheelie. I noticed in this plan they're gone. And there's other.
Yeah, so no, there's no intention right now to do anything with those 2 buildings. Those are the newest buildings, and they're ones that Peter Lawrence Company's received awards for, or a lot of accolades for. But when we took this through the zoning process, staff asked us to think about the long-term future, as in 20 years from now, future of what those buildings would look like, and to plan around an eventual redevelopment if market conditions were ever, to dictate. So that's the reason why this is a conceptual plan. And that's it. We have no intention right now, and Fred, you can speak to a bit of tearing down those buildings in the immediate future at all.
Okay, because I noticed the courtyard, and courtyard to me says residential. And we also talked about the entire Isaac Newton has 3,200. You have 2,100 under your control. And that's a lot of people, and that's a lot of dogs, and that's a lot of people needing recreation. So that you're putting all the dog and all the recreation for like a basketball court type of thing. Now I see the children's playground and some passive stuff over to the far west, but that's a lot of people. The 2100 you control. Now we have the wonderful soccer field, not dissing on that whatsoever. Everybody's looking forward to that. The trigger on that will be two decades away, maybe. So the trigger on the park will be with the RUP on N2. Is that correct?
Presumably, yeah, that's correct. I have to go back and look at exactly what the proffer is, but it's something like that. That's correct.
Okay, because I mean, with that many people, they need to have something, and those dogs, you know, it seems like the smaller the apartment, the bigger the dog. So we are going to need that desperately. Where is ADA visitor parking? We've acknowledged that we have an enormous amount of delivery trucks, FedEx, food drops, UPS, et cetera, et cetera. And thank God for the turnabout. That is genius. Thank you so much. There's so many good things about this plan. I'm thrilled, but ADA parking is going to be an issue.
We envision that possibly some of these ground floor spaces right when you enter into the parking structure can also be visitor spaces, and there will be accessible spaces in there. And then, you know, this all connects into the lobby as well. So that's
okay.
Where that can be located.
And the lobby obviously has elevators.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Tammy, just to confirm, Nature's Edge Park, that portion of it does need to be in place by the time of the first RUP for this building.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's see. I think, you know, I second what other people have said. I noticed that you have gone from 300 to 345 on your zoning committee report to 331 total units. One thing I am exceedingly worried about is on the east-west streets in Isaac Newton Square, tall buildings to the south blocking sunlight that these trees have always known. So, you know, we're talking about having a step down with the lower buildings to the north. I'm a little bit freaking out on that the east-west streets are going, I mean, the north-south streets will get sunlight, but the east-west will not. I'm just afraid they won't get enough to survive after all of the effort you put in to keeping them alive.
And Don, you can probably speak to that. I know that we did provide a shadow study with the original CDP as well, and then.
Yeah, we can. I think we ought to go back and double check to make sure that we've checked that box. But I do believe, given the height of these trees relative to the height of the building and the distance that those buildings are away from the trees, that we're okay. But we'll go back and double check that.
Okay, and another question on housing. You gave us the 25, 25, 50, but is the 50 110 AMI or 100?
100.
100. So I erroneously wrote down 110. So I will change that. But really, we need housing that's for the WDUs that are at a little bit lower AMIs. So I would hope you would be able to change that to 90, 70, 80, 90. Okay, I think I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tammy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tammy. Let's go to Jared and then Michelle.
So I will second what a lot of people have said. I think it's a nice design approach. I like the articulation, the color usage, the way you're breaking it up. I will second what Matt said, though, about the potential of stepping back that penthouse level. I think there could be some architectural benefits there. I guess I want to come back to something, the questions Tammy had asked about in the project application worksheet. It calls out the walkway on the south side of block N2 as only being 6 feet and the mixed use trail as being 8. And I guess I would express a little concern about an 8-foot wide trail. If it truly is mixed use, if you're thinking you're going to have bicyclists, pedestrians, mixed ages on there, that can be a bit narrow. A lot of times, 12 feet is more preferred width for something like that. I don't know if there's an opportunity to look at, a less rigid, maybe more flexible trail system that opens and closes up for wider widths, pathways, things like that.
Don, do you want to answer that one?
I think we can consider that. I think we also just need to keep in mind how much pedestrian traffic is going to be on that trail. It's not a regional trail, so I understand the crossing. We're trying to hit that, that sweet spot where we're not paving, the whole site, trying to keep that down, but also allowing it to be functional. So we'll give it a harder look.
Great, thank you.
All right, let's go to Michelle.
Great, thank you very much. Let's see, I just wanted to actually touch on, but with a little different detail, a few things that have already been brought up. So the first one, if we could, on WDUs. So in the last version, I believe, of the staff provided version of the upcoming Reston comprehensive plan for rental units, we're actually hoping for 6% at 71 to 80 AMI, 3% at 60 to 70, and 3% at up to 60. So I would like to ask that you meet those income levels instead of what you proposed, which has already been studied, is really anything, in that 90 to 100 is unnecessary. And what we need are the lower levels. So I'd like to see, can you look into that and come back to us if that's feasible?
We can certainly look into that. In some respects, the rules that we agreed to and what we've underwritten this at was at those lower AMI tiers back in 2019. But happy to go back and look at that too.
And sure, I understand that when this was done, this hadn't we hadn't even started that process, which that was started a long time ago. But 2019 was even before that. That being said, where we are with the data that's available right now, it's the lower AMIs are where it's needed. Additionally, I'm a little bit concerned. So you have the one playground for the whole development, not over to the left-hand side. When would that come online?
That would come online prior to the first RUP of either of those two blocks where the cursor is. So where those townhouse blocks are, before anyone would be able to move into those blocks, that's where it would be. And the way that we've envisioned all of this is that it starts at the north and it works its way to the south. So, we thought a year ago that we would be under construction by now with those townhouse blocks and with block N1 over by Wheelie Avenue. And as I mentioned at the beginning, due to construction costs, due to higher interest rates, it just became untenable. But we're continuing to have conversations with interested townhouse developers and builders, and hopefully we'd be able to bring all of this online almost in at the same time. So Fred, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, but
yeah, that's the hope, and that was the plan for the CDP. And maybe it's helpful to remind people as well that there is a sizable lawn and rec area in the meander in the middle. Then there's a sports field on the south with a very sizable pavilion connection to the WO&D trail with a very sizable plaza. So, I think people that were involved with the CDP know that we spent a boatload of time thinking well through this whole plan. and what we were doing. So
I don't think anyone, doesn't think that. I think the problem is those aren't going to come online for quite some time. And so, you can't have a generation of kids not having somewhere to play. So to the extent that we can, have designated play areas and make sure that those come online when you have people move in, I'm just concerned that, you really have a dearth of playgrounds in this area. It's not like they can walk to any from here. I don't know of any right there where you could walk to.
I think it's important to see probably the play area for the kids between the townhouse blocks W2 and N1 on the left side. That's a very sizable area as well.
Right.
So
But my concern is when it comes online and
together with those blocks. So just like the dog park and the sports court would go with N2, that kids play area would come online with the townhouses. The block N2 realistically will not have young kids living in there. That's not the type of product where they live.
I disagree with that. Just go over to the Wheelie Metro Station. You'll see tricycles on balconies. Kids are moving in. You can't keep people from procreating. So let's see. The other thing is just what school district do you think the children would be in here? Is that Forest Edge, or have you had any discussions with FCPS?
Yeah, so this would go to Sunrise Valley Elementary School, Langston Hughes Middle School, and South Lakes High School, all of which have capacity. And we went through extensively, FCPS did extensive studies on this when we took this through the process.
I guess the problem though is if you're going all the way to Sunrise Valley, that's a long drive. That's not a walkable school. And so, it would be nice. I don't know what else to do, but that just seems pretty far to get to Sunrise Valley. Where would the buses pick up?
Well, presumably they would pick up, either on Wheelie Avenue or on Isaac Newton Square North, but that has not been, I don't think that's been determined. And we also do not control busing zones or anything like that.
Right. But if you could, put some thought into making sure that you have a safe space for the children to gather for the bus stops. Because what we see across the street on Wheelie is they're right on Wheelie. And I don't know if you've ever driven by, but it's a little scary sometimes because it's a large group of kids who live there. And, they're all right there on a hill waiting to get on the bus. So, it would be great if when you came to us, you could, present some ideas on how we're going to have safe routes to school and safe ways for kids to really use this area. Because, again, I mean, that's one of the main reasons people to move to Fairfax, too, is for the schools and because you have kids. Let's see. So that would be nice if we could see that or just have a better idea. And then, if the playground gets delayed and you have a number of units and, for whatever reason, those townhouses are delayed, I do think you need some type of at least temporary tot lot or playground or something, because again, you just can't walk to anything here. And I guess the other thing too is, you really can't walk to much healthy food. You have the 7-Eleven and McDonald's and Taco Bell, but that's it. So, unless you're going to the metro, the walkability is really rough here. Is there any plans in some of the other buildings that would be more mixed use to provide some healthy food stores or something to get fresh food?
I think that all of our retail, most of the retail is down by the athletic field in those mixed use buildings along sort of like the Village Main Street area. We have not even programmed those buildings yet. That is years away. So we wouldn't be able to answer that for you right now.
Yeah. Well, then it just seems it's very isolated and very not walkable to things that you need for, everyday life. But I guess my other concern is there's a lot of interior courtyards. And so, I know you have the meander, but with all of those, if I if you live in one building, it's not like you can go into another building's courtyard. It's almost like they're still creating isolated communities within this one development. And so that's something just for social cohesion purposes that I just wanted to highlight and see if there was some more thought there on
Well,
how
so
yeah.
Yeah, and just to answer that, if we go back to the larger slide, when we originally did this rendered drawing, all of the blocks were that beige color. And it was actually, I don't remember if it was like someone from P&Z or staff that was like, could you just ghost in a couple of like just some courtyards or something? So, any of these blocks could be, the buildings could take any shape. This is just to show one potential concept of what could be. It really has nothing to do with what's within the building envelope that was actually approved with the CDP. So please do not read too much into the interior courtyards. Some of them may open directly onto the street. Some of them may be interior, in different configuration. We just don't know yet.
Okay. And then last thing for me, and the one that we saw about this courtyard, is that a pool or a pond? Just for clarification, I couldn't really tell.
Brian?
It's a pool.
It's a pool. Okay.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Listen, I see Katie has her hand up. Listen, it's a little after 9 o'clock. I think we're going to have to wrap this up. I want Katie to get her word in, and I want to go to Larry and John Carter before we wrap up. But I do want to encourage members to issue additional comments via writing to the applicants. This is not our only time that we can just tonight to voice our comments. We could also submit them in writing, and I strongly encourage us to do that to get our points across. And this is, as you can see, this project is very early in its development, and as we all need to be reminded of what was already really approved on the conceptual development plan. And so there's a lot of detail being talked about tonight that's actually already, the ship has sailed and it's kind of gone down the road, and now we're getting into the nitty gritty of the fine tuning of the buildings. But I just think, Andrew, you'll have to kind of keep reminding us of each time you come before us, what's some of those key elements that have already been kind of decided upon on the conceptual development plan approvals. But let's go on to Katie, and then I want to get Larry and John Carter after that.
Okay, hey, thanks. Real quick, and pardon me, I had to step away for a couple minutes, but I just wanted to ask, the HOA, is everybody's part of one HOA in this group? And maybe somebody already asked that question, and forgive me if they did. Is it just one HOA?
There's going to be, and Fred, you can speak to this, there would be a building owner that would own this building, but there is a larger unified owners association. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, we do have Proffer 11G, I think it is, that requires us to negotiate in good faith to also join RA as well.
Right.
Fred?
No, I was just asking, like, for the maintaining the sport court, the dog park, the
Correct.
kids, all that
There's an
stuff.
umbrella owners association.
Okay, that's all I was just curious. Okay.
For all the blocks.
Thank you.
Larry Butler, any words of wisdom?
Yeah, just real quick, great presentation. Having spent 28 years of my professional life in Isaac Newton Square before moving over to Reston Corner, I appreciate the great effort that you all are taking for the Willow Oaks. It was a great shaded walk in the summer to just walk the square. Just a couple of quick things. Andrew and Fred, I look forward to having the chat regarding RA membership and so forth. But I also want to draw your attention to and this is a great image to have up, the 1 acre triangle to the northeast here between this parcel and Wheelie Avenue is owned by Reston Association. Not really sure why, because it's kind of chalked in there between the road, Isaac Newton Square, and the golf course. There's a fairly substantial head cut on the stream and the outfall that goes through there. And I am a little bit concerned about the stormwater runoff exacerbating that. Now, obviously, it's a short run on our property before it hits the golf course and then heads downstream. But that's something that, and again, I haven't seen the stormwater plans specifically for this, but I hope that's something that can be addressed. But the other thing, you've got, as shown on the screen here, Nature's Edge. Maybe there's an opportunity for you all to work with us to create maybe even a natural surface trail that goes through that to extend the nature part of this, because it's an acre that it's frankly totally unused at this point, other than the fact that it's got the drainage way through the middle. So when we do get together to talk about this and the other project that I know I'm remiss on getting back to with a scheduled meeting, maybe we can talk about that at the same time.
Sure, that makes sense.
Thank you,
For
Larry.
the opportunity, Rob.
Sure. Commissioner Carter, do you have any words of wisdom? Oh, John, I think you're muted again. Hey, John, you have to unmute.
How about now? Can you hear
There
me?
you go. Yep.
Okay, I've got a big item. Could you take off the road to nowhere on the southern point? I think we've killed that 1,000 deaths, and I don't think you would affect the zoning. But please take that off. There was a really good discussion about the streets themselves, but I think we need some work on the details of this, the lights and the crosswalks and where the trail is. Is it on this side, or it might be better on the other side of the street? We need a way of keeping track of the development numbers as well as we move through this. You're going to want that. And then I keep staring at that section through the street. It looks to me like you could use a little more room there. You're over the red line anyway, so I think you should look at pushing that back just a little bit. Looks like you have room on the north side, and I think the grades are pretty flat once you get down because of the previous building. So anyway, somehow that doesn't seem quite right there, the amount of space. And maybe that's enough for now.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Carter. I think that's all I see in the chat in terms of comments with people. And let's see.
If I could just add for 20 seconds that they would consider a no gas program for this whole development area. We're running out of time to implement these things. Thank you.
All right, we'll have a response for you on that when we come back.
Yeah, we're hearing that as a repeated theme with a lot of new developments. But well, listen, Andrew and Fred, I appreciate you coming before us tonight. I think there's a lot of good information that we heard tonight, and then you've heard a lot of great comments. And once again, I think when we move ahead to be reminded of the prior approvals on the conceptual development plan, I think it will be a big help. And as you guys continue to facilitate and fine tune the building and fine tune the surroundings, we look forward to you coming back whenever you feel it's appropriate.
Great, thank you very much. And yeah, we found that early and often interaction with P&Z and other community members is the best approach, and we aim to do that on a continual basis with this too. So thank you very much. I know this went over a long time, but I think we got a lot of good feedback, and we'll be back to you shortly.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right.
Thank
now
you.
we go on to application number 2. So the second application, also here just for the first time tonight. Now this is the conceptual development plan and final development plan for some addresses at Association Drive. It's being submitted by JLB and the Toll Brothers. I guess it's a joint partnership with Brian Winterhalter is representing the applicant tonight. Brian, take it away.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here. As
The chair, Rob, has noted, this is our first time here. We have filed this application with Fairfax County. We are hoping that it will be accepted formally for processing any time now. We've been coordinating with county staff on some of the final details for the application. So that's where we are from a process perspective. So very early in the process. I'm going to run through a presentation, and the JLB team, the toll team, and the rest of our team is here to answer any questions that you have. Whoops. There we go. So you know the site, we're in Association Drive. This application is for 2 of the 10 parcels within Association Drive. Those 2 parcels are highlighted. It's 1900 and 1920 Association Drive at each end of the U or horseshoe that is Association Drive. Obviously, we're south of the toll road, west of Wheelie, north of Sunrise Valley Drive, and the 2 parcels each have boundaries along the toll road. Here's where we are and where we sit with this parcel, or these parcels, with respect to the overall development that's going on at the Wheelie Metro Station area. You see the sizable Comstock Commerce Metro Center application property that's located to our east, the existing Russell residential building that's already developed along Sunrise Valley Drive, a couple of other parcels, the office condo parcel, the IGS parcel, and then our 2 parcels and the other 8 parcels within Association Drive. We have reached out to a number of associations. We haven't yet met with everyone. Again, it's still early in the process, but we have had a meeting within the last month with the Weathersfield Cluster Association, and we will continue our outreach with the other folks, and we'll meet with them as well. But wanted to show you the slide, and we're intending to meet with everybody that is represented here in terms of associations, and the folks who are on Upper Lake Drive and Great Meadow Drive, who are not part of a formal cluster association. With respect to the comprehensive plan, you see the purple area highlighted. That is the transit station mixed use area, as you know, with the recommendation for a 1.5 to 2.5 FAR on the south side of the metro station, with a mix of 50% residential and 50% non-residential uses. And then the brownish color area is the residential mixed use area, and that is recommended in the comprehensive plan for 75% residential use and 25% non-residential use. To zoom into where we are, our application property actually is right along that boundary. The parcel on the east is in the transit station mixed use area, and the parcel on the west is in the residential mixed use area, as you can see here. This is the grid of streets. This isn't exactly to scale. We sort of tried to lay in where the parcels are over the grid of streets, and we'll show you a couple of other exhibits of how we have coordinated with County DOT to honor the grid of streets that's in the comprehensive plan and further the implementation of that grid with our proposed development. So to review the development proposal briefly, there is a multifamily building that is along the toll road and the farther back portion of the site. That is a 6-story residential building that is 6 stories on some portions, 5 stories on other portions, depending on the grade. And it's 400 residential units. And then the southern portion of the site is the triplex units, and that is a total of 39 units. And you can see some of the urban park spaces here, which I'll talk about in more detail in a few minutes. And then we have a new east-west road here that's essentially connecting each of the ends of the horseshoe of Association Drive, and then a new road here coming north-south, which is where the road is located in the comprehensive plan grid of streets. Then ultimately this road would be able to be widened to have a full section here with the ultimate development of this parcel. This shows you an overlay of the grid of streets and the comp plan with our proposed development. Again, we coordinated with County DOT to honor the grid of streets that's in the comprehensive plan, both the east-west connections and the north-south connections. It's debatable as to whether the grading works for a connection, if you can see my cursor here, between this east-west road and the soapstone extension. And so we, in our coordination with County DOT, so you're all aware, their preference was that this portion of our road actually be a sort of a more minor road, and that is not anticipated to connect here. although it's possible the grade could work and we're open to that, but we've designed it this way based on our discussions with County DOT. The primary connection to soapstone would be here at this, what I'll call the mid-block road that's east-west right here. And this shows the grid of streets in our proposed development with the overall area between Wheelie Avenue on the east and Soapstone on the west. That includes the proposed Commerce Metro Center development that is in process with Fairfax County that Comstock is working on right now. And some of the grid connections to be able to integrate our proposed development with their proposed development and how it would all be interconnected in this larger overall grid to implement the goals of the comprehensive plan with respect to the establishment of the grid of streets and transportation connections. Just to run through the numbers, I mentioned the 400 multifamily units, 39 triplex units. Based on what's currently in the comprehensive plan, we would have a total of 57 ADUs and WDUs. That's almost entirely WDUs based on the zoning ordinance formula for ADUs. Obviously, we're aware, and for some of the discussion that you mentioned in the previous application, we're certainly aware of what's in the pending comprehensive plan amendment for Reston overall and the potential changes to the ADU and WDU expectations there. But for now, that is based on current comprehensive plan policy, which is 13% based on our proposed density. The multifamily building would be about 410,000 square feet, the triplex units collectively about 75,000 square feet, yielding a total of 485,000, which, as you can see on this slide, is about a 1.65 FAR. That's actually lower than the FAR that's recommended in the comp plan. There's a 2.5 FAR recommendation for the transit station mixed use area, 1.5 FAR for the residential mixed use area. And if you take those two and blend them over the areas of each of the properties and come up with an average, I'm going to get it wrong, but I think it was 2.1 or 2.2. But we are below that FAR recommendation. You see the numbers with respect to open space. We are exceeding the requirement of 1.35 acres. We are exceeding the urban parkland standards by a bit. We'll show you what we think are really nice, high quality urban park spaces that will meet a range of uses for the residents of the building. As many of you probably already know, and I think some of you were actually at the community meeting, we have submitted an SSPA nomination, site-specific plan amendment nomination, for 7 of the 10 parcels in Association Drive, including these 2 parcels. This obviously our rezoning application is involving only 2 of those 7 parcels, but we wanted to just briefly mention the SSPA nomination because that is in process with the county as well. The proposal under the SSPA nomination for those 7 parcels in Association Drive is to allow up to 100% residential based on what's happening at other portions of this metro station area. Our objective is to apply that to the entirety of the Association Drive assemblage, and we think that's quite complementary with what's happening closer to the metro station and Comstock's development in their actual proposal, which exceeds the current office recommendation in the comprehensive plan. So the plan already acknowledges that there's more office is more appropriate closer to the metro station with a recommendation of a 50-50 mix, and that more residential is appropriate in the residential mixed use area with a recommendation of 75-25. And what you're seeing in their proposal and our proposal is essentially going in those directions of more office at the metro station, more residential, a bit farther away from the metro station in the area between 1/4 mile and 1/2 mile, which is where we're located. With respect to transportation recommendations, as I mentioned before, we coordinated with County DOT on the grid of streets, and part of our SSPA nomination is to support the grid that is currently in the comprehensive plan and to allow for reasonable building blocks as part of that grid of streets. And then with respect to heritage resources, obviously we know and you all know that there's been a significant amount of discussion and focus and study and analysis on the architectural character of many of the buildings in Association Drive. And we are proposing to, with our SSPA nomination, require the acknowledgement of that architectural context while also providing for redevelopment. With respect to the design of the building specifically, this is some precedent imagery that we have. This will give you a sense of the materiality of the buildings, the color palette and the materials. And you see, again, not dissimilar from the building that you saw earlier tonight with some of the red brick and some of the darker grays and some contemporary features to break up the massing of the building. This is representative of the architectural design. This is not the exact building. I'll show you that in a couple slides. But we wanted to give you a sense of this because this reads really well in the nice way that this is rendered. Same here. Again, you see the architectural character of the proposed development. Again, this is a different site. This is precedent imagery, but it's the same type of architectural design language that we would use for the proposed building. This is our actual site. So you can see how the building sits in the topography here. This is the road that connects each end of the horseshoe of Association Drive. This is that plaza area out in front. We'll show you what that looks like in a more detailed design perspective and what we envision for that area. Garage entry here and back here, entry to the building here, and there are other entries to the building as well. But wanted to show you this as you can see the massing of the building and how it sits on the site. Similar here, again, just some representative design, and this would be that plaza area fronting along the road that runs east-west in front of the multifamily building. With respect to the triplex units, this is the envisioned architecture for the triplex units. You see there are some different models, some different features, but overall consistent with the architectural design language of the bigger multifamily building. And these would be 4-story units, and I'll show you what the triplex units look like on the inside. So the first floor is the garage. The second floor is a basically flat unit, like a one-level condo unit, and that's here. That's what you see. So these stairs go up to the middle unit, which is all of this area. And then these stairs on each side, if you can see my cursor, go up, and you're in the third floor, and this is kind of like a 2/2 on top. So this is the bottom floor of the 2/2. This is the top floor of the 2/2. And then same thing on this side and this side. So you have 2 units sitting on top of 1 unit, and all 3 of those units are sitting on top of garage level. And it looks like this. Here's the garage level. Here's the first unit, the first floor of the upper 2 units, and then the second floor of the upper 2 units, the roof, and then this is what it looks like in cross section. So 1 unit, 1 unit, 1 unit. 3 units makes a triplex. With respect to the open space areas, this is the courtyard area in front of the residential building. That's a nice area for seating and some relaxation. We have some areas here with a terrace area. And then over here, we have a larger park area that includes pickleball courts and a stage or sort of outdoor deck area that's raised up. There's a nice lawn area here that can be used as a multi-purpose lawn and a lot of different types of activities that could happen in this larger park space. And then here is an open lawn area that's, again, multi-purpose, a lot of different recreational activities here. Children's play area here. Haven't yet finalized the design for that. Again, we're still early in the process, but we will have a children's play area as part of the proposed development, and then another outdoor gathering area here. We'll also have a trail along the entirety of the toll road frontage of the property, which will connect into the trail that will be on its way to the metro station across the Commerce Metro Center project. To give you a bit more background and detail on what we envision for the outdoor spaces, the images here are the area that is in the front of the multifamily building. Again, you see seating, areas to hang out, relax, enjoy some shade. Looks like there's yoga going on in this one. That looks nice. This is the interior courtyard of the multifamily building, pool, multi-purpose lawn area. Here you see some of the other areas, some hardscaped areas, gathering seating with some shade trees, some multi-purpose lawn areas here, the pickleball courts here. And again, a nice range of amenities and different types of recreational uses for a range of folks who would be living in the building. And this is the multi-purpose lawn area, and then the children's play area here. That's closer to where these are the triplex units here. And with that, I will conclude my presentation, and we are here and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Brian, let me just start off with just a overarching comment, because I'm sure a lot of the committee members have it, the same one. So you mentioned the SSPA in that process, and you mentioned the other association properties. Can you better explain the relationship of these two parcels with those other association parcels? And then how far do you really see this development, these two parcels, getting without the SSPA approval?
Yeah, so both good questions. So we think that we are in conformance with the comprehensive plan, notwithstanding the mix of use recommendations for 50/50 and 75/25, given that those are intended to be overall recommendations for the metro station area, and that there is significantly more office development in the metro station area, and specifically as well, obviously as part of Comstock's proposed development. So I'd make the argument that we are in conformance with the comprehensive plan, or it certainly balances out in a complementary way to have more residential here and have more office there. We're under the FAR that's recommended in the comprehensive plan. And so I would say that I think that we are in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Part of, frankly, what we have done with the SSPA nomination is to propose that we, as the 7 of the 10 owners who are part of the SSPA nomination, are affirming that they are in support of the grid of streets that's in the comprehensive plan now. That's what we've been working on with our development of these two parcels in our application, and we've been coordinating with County DOT on that. The task force, as I think many of you or all of you know, at its last meeting adopted a recommendation for a different grid of streets, and we are not in support of that grid of streets. And I will be very straightforward and tell you that we are not in support of that grid of streets, and that is part of the purpose of our SSPA nomination.
Okay, let us open up for some questions.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt, but you actually asked 2 questions and I only answered 1. So I'll answer your second question as well, which is how far do we think we can proceed with this proposed development? And I'll say 2 things to that. One is we can develop this property prior to the development of the other properties and utilize the connections with Association Drive that are there. So we are not changing the configuration of Association Drive with this proposed 2-parcel development, and there will be access to the property. With respect to what the other owners do and want to move forward with, we would certainly be open to coordinating with them and having an overall sort of process happening in parallel, if you will. But I don't think that there is a likelihood that there will be a larger consolidated rezoning application for all of Association Drive as there was previously.
Okay, and I think that helps answer the question that you guys are not in control of the other parcels within Association Drive. There are other ownership entities, and quite frankly, I think that's where the community is going to have the problem, where in not seeing the whole pie, but only seeing a little piece is going to be really difficult. But let's go on.
Well, the last thing I'll say, totally understood. The last thing I'll say is we have worked hard to design our plan so that it does not inhibit any of the other owners from developing, and they could develop in a coordinated fashion with the grid of streets that we're envisioning. And it's the grid of streets that's envisioned in the comp plan. So we're certainly not precluding any of the other owners from developing in a way that would be in conformance with the comp plan.
Okay. All right, let's go on to some questions. Let's go to Tammy and then Matt after Tammy.
Thank you. Brian, wish I loved this. Do not love it at all. Sorry. I have 6 pages of notes. I'm not going to be going through all of them, but basically this Association Drive area has some of the most beautiful trees in Reston, and you all are talking about a grid of streets that has not taken into account where the specimen trees are. Obviously, you can't save every beautiful tree here, but in Reston, you ought to be able to save a lot of these trees in this area, and this is a strictly flat piece of paper, and let's put as much density as we can. So that's a huge problem to me. The second problem I have is that I don't know where you're getting your information. The Comstock is not planning to have significant residential on their parcels. They are. We've had them come and tell us how dense it's going to be for them. Everybody is densifying to a fare thee well. So that's
Yeah,
that. Where
their plan, Tammy, is 80% non-residential.
that has that changed?
No,
Because
and I know because I'm working on it. So their plan has
Okay.
always been 80% non-residential and it's 70% office.
okay.
Those are
So
those are just to point it out, those are the percentages that they're proposing.
80 that they're okay. So how are you proposing to stack 400 DUs literally right on top of the Dulles Toll Road when there exists a 200-foot waiver that you're asking? You know, a 50-foot waiver, 100-foot waiver, whatever, zero space. You have a path actually touching the border of the Dulles Toll Road, and this is way too close for this kind of residential density. Yes, you have part of your garage on that to buffer, good, but considering the gymnastics that other developers are going through to buffer and not even have recreation space that is near the DTR because of the noise and the pollution and whatever, we know as electric comes in, it's going to be less noisy, but I'm informed it's still noisy from the tires. So I'm very concerned about that.
So just real quick, Tammy, if I may, on that point, I hear you, and we will obviously have to do a noise study, and that is not yet completed. But when it is completed, we'll submit it to the county. They will review it, and we will need to have noise mitigation measures as part of the construction of the building. You already noted that a good portion of the frontage along the toll road is the garage, but for the residential units, we will need to have building mitigation measures for noise. So that'll all be part of the review that we haven't gotten to that point yet. So that's why I don't have more detailed information on it.
Yeah, you're showing balconies looking over the DTR. So I don't know how you're going to attenuate noise on a balcony. You have said that read through 200 in the 400 building, 290 one bedrooms, 110 two bedrooms. I assume that's going to be rental, not
yes.
condo. Okay, and
That's
then
correct.
the toll part, the 39 triplexes, are those going to be for sale?
Those would be for sale, yes.
Okay, and right now you've got one of those triplexes being an ADU and everything else in the plan being a WDU, is that correct?
That is correct. That is per the county zoning ordinance formula for ADUs based on the density and the math. So that's purely driven by the formula. That hasn't been negotiated or discussed with the county staff yet.
Right. Okay. And then you hopefully heard my cautionary tale about how the 1 and 2 bedrooms are not being rented elsewhere. I don't know how being on the DTR would be magical and get you renters there, but I would be very careful. Okay. The trees are what I'm really freaking out about. Those have to be saved. If there's anywhere in Reston, there has to be paid attention to. And thank you for saying you're not wedded to the grid of streets. I don't think you're meaning what I hope you're meaning, but please don't be wedded to it. FCDOT has to not be wedded to it. Those trees we can never, ever replace. Thank you.
So one thing I will say about the trees, and we will have more information about the trees. I'm not surprised to hear you say that you are in support of keeping the trees. And I know that there's been discussion, and there was discussion during the task force process about changing the grid of streets because of the stand of trees or some of the stands of trees that are in the Association Drive area. For what it's worth, and we'll have more exhibits and more details the next time we meet with you all. But for what it's worth, the bulk of that large stand of trees that's kind of in the middle of Association Drive that I think people are most interested in is not on this site. That is south of the boundary of where we are, just to put that out there so you guys know.
Right. I saw in one of your photos, one of the few photos, that there was a beautiful tree right adjacent to the parking lot. So, so thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm done.
Thanks, Tammy. Let's go to Matt and then William Pegues.
Excuse me. I share some of Timmy's concerns about the setback off the toll road, so I won't waste everybody's time by talking about that. But I want to talk about these triplex units, because I guess my first reaction to that is that's one of the more convoluted things that I've seen in my time participating in this committee and also just doing multifamily architecture. You know, I understand kind of the idea behind a 2/2. You're sort of getting some of the benefits of a row house, but for maybe a lower price point as far as the, you know, your own garage and a multi-level living space. But trying to pack 3 units into that model, I mean, for one thing, I don't even really understand how it works. I'm not sure how, like, I don't know if you're under the International Residential Code or the IBC with 3 units. And if you are under IBC, it seems like there'd be some really challenging fireproofing considerations. I don't really understand how, like, fire hose links work onto that top unit. So, I mean, just as sort of a building typography, it's very strange and weird to me. And I've actually never seen that, you know, in my career so far. So maybe it's something new, but it certainly threw up a red flag to me. I also think just, you know, the way the units stack from an architecture standpoint, it just doesn't work for me. I mean, I think that, you know, if you look at that elevation, it looks like exactly what it is, which is, you know, units that are stacked on top of each other that aren't having really any sort of an architectural relationship with each other. So you end up with like windows that are out of alignments or bays that are sort of randomly placed 2 stories off the ground. And there's really no sort of architectural cohesive language that's kind of stacking and tying these buildings together and creating this kind of nice rhythm, which actually I think you're doing much more successfully on the larger multifamily building. So my challenge, I guess, would be, I mean, if 39 units is the target, and these are relatively small units, why not just build, you know, a more traditional apartment building, you know, with covered parking on the back side, perhaps everyone could have a private spot, you know, and then you have shared stairs, you know, that connect into the units. I guess I'm just not really seeing what the benefit of trying to do this sort of convoluted design with these strange stairwells that come up through the building and take away exterior light and air from the lower units. It really just doesn't work for me at all. So that's kind of my feelings on that. I would much rather see, you know, something that's more traditional, I guess, as far as how those units could be laid out and still achieving, you know, your required parking and your required unit count. That's all I got.
So yeah, so if someone from the toll team wants to jump on to chat about the triplex units, feel free, because I am far from the architectural expert, which I will quickly confess. But as a sort of overall big picture outlook, it's like a 2/2 in that it gives you larger units at price points that are different from the multifamily and price points that are different from a true, you know, townhouse or single family house.
What, I mean, I'm curious. Like this is an education for me because I've never seen this before. What are the square footage averages for this, for like a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit?
Yeah, Scott, Angela, do you guys want to jump in with the details?
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I kind of get it. You know, it is a you know, it's a product that you really haven't seen you know, in Northern Virginia yet. We are programming it currently at several different communities right now in Loudoun and in Fairfax. And you know, so it is just not a whole lot different in a way. I mean, the idea is for it to look like a townhome on the outside, which I think it does.
I disagree because you have misalignments of your elements. It doesn't have that nice rhythm that townhouses create, you know, as you kind of go down the block.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was we were going for the townhouses anyway. So but the square footage. So you have a 2-car garage for each unit on the ground floor, a tandem 2-car garage. And some of the feedback that we've gotten elsewhere is that, you know, some of the jurisdictions really like that because all the cars are parked inside. And then if you go 1 floor up, it's a traditional flat. And it's approximately 1,345 square feet. 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,345 square feet.
Okay, I mean, that's a good size, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
say it's out of the realm of what I've seen for, you know, plenty of multifamily buildings for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath.
It's pretty
So
big for a 2-bedroom,
it's
2-bath.
big. It's on the bigger
Yeah.
side. I'll give you that.
Yeah. So then, and then you each garage. So the 2 garage on the ends, they have you come out of the garage and into kind of a foyer area at the bottom of the stairs. You take the staircase up 2 flights to the first floor to one of your side-by-side units. And so above that flat unit, you have what feels like a townhome side by side on top of that flat, very much like a townhome. And those are approximately 1,738 square feet.
All right.
For
Well,
a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath with an option for a 3rd bedroom.
here's some unsolicited architecture advice. If this was me and I was trying to study this, I would like to actually see if this is what you're proposing, a separation between sort of the first floor unit that kind of has its own language and massing. You know, that could be done in like a masonry or something. And then as you kind of move up to the sort of side by side 2-level units, some kind of a step back, you know, along the front that could be a balcony for those units that it creates this sort of separation. It's just, I don't know. There was something about the facade when you shut it, and I was like, "Ooh, that's just not working for me."
Right. Yeah, we have you know, the facade is a little bit different on the few different jobs we're setting up in
All right. Well,
Fairfax. So
thank you for
maybe one of our
kind
other
of
ones you'd like better.
thank you for kind of explaining it to me. Like I said, I look at these things all day, and I haven't really seen this typography before.
Yeah, it's a new. We're excited about rolling it out in Northern Virginia. Like I said, we've got quite a few.
I still have questions, but I think you've helped me a little bit here.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to William Pegues and then John.
Okay, I'll bring up the point about the gas and ranges and things like that, is that induction ranges are really very nice and they don't have to be considered high end. They have very, I guess you would say, standard size units and small size units that are very high quality and not trying to be, you know, a chef's gourmet range. But they do range all the way up to that, and they are much better than standard electrics. And of course, they have much better control of heat than gas does, and don't have any of the problems that gas is now turning around to actually be sort of polluting our houses with. The other thing is that stormwater management, I'm not sure where your tanks are located, but wherever they are, if you were to go to a various different types of vegetated roofing systems, you might be able to eliminate them for all of the water that would fall on the roof. And as has been mentioned by other people here, is that vegetated roofs work very well on wood frame construction. In addition to that, it can make it so that whatever is on your top floor doesn't have to have as heavy duty cooling units as the other floors, because the shadows created by the plants bring the temperature down 30 plus degrees from what a white reflective roof might be. The other thing is that if you have spaces where you're putting things on the ground, you might consider urban agriculture. You don't seem to have a whole lot of room on the ground, but you can also put these onto your multifamily building on the roof. Even though it's wood, it has to do with the water that it's going to hold is not going to be ever higher than what your scuppers are going to have to be for that building. So basically, if you can hold the water that's going to be in the scuppers, you can hold the the plants and the water that would be there as well. And that one of the things that you might consider is that you can look at using the roof as urban agriculture as opposed to simply vegetated roofing. That's all I want to say at this point. Most of those are like suggestions. Go out and look at them. Talk to the different people that have done these kinds of things. They're all over the place, especially the urban agriculture stuff. There's like a number of buildings all over downtown Washington, and they don't, if you stay with a traditional kind of reflective roof, you can still have raised bed planters on those, which is what many of the buildings downtown in DC did, although some of them actually have full vegetated roofing systems with full agriculture on the top. That's it for me.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we'll take a look at that and we will have further thoughts when we meet with you next.
All right, thanks, William. Let's go to John and then on to Mike.
Hello, great job as always, Brian. Great to see you. One quick question. I have 3 questions. First question is, what's the occupancy rate of the existing office buildings?
That is a good question. Graham or Scott or Angela, you want to answer that question with the latest?
The Shape building's completely empty. They vacated a while ago and it's completely empty. The Worthland building I would have to check on, which is the taller of the two, but we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, I was just curious because I drive by there frequently and it appears as if it's very low. Number 2, Brian, same, you probably heard my last questions. Any comments on the ability to meet the existing comprehensive plan for stormwater requirements, particularly the stormwater runoff reduction?
Yeah, if Peter from VICA is on, he can address that more specifically, but we're obviously aware of the comp plan goals for stormwater management, and I think our plan is to intend to meet them.
So as far as the comprehensive guidelines, we're reducing the 2-year flow rate by 25%. We looked into using infiltration for trying to reduce some of the volume, but the rates were not conducive to that. So what we're proposing to do is go 20% higher in terms of what is required for the BMPs to try to make up for that.
Gotcha. So maybe a compromise.
Yes. So we're trying to do a compromise there.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that makes sense to me. I know it's tough to meet those goals given the limited real estate. So certainly appreciate your efforts there. And I know that's going to be a challenge for literally any development trying to meet those comprehensive plan goals. And then Kevin, I mentioned you in the last presentation, but giving you lots of FaceTime here. Just curious as to any comments you have on transportation here.
Yeah, definitely. So we did meet with Fairfax County staff very early in the process to discuss the application, provide them a trip generation assessment so they kind of understood, what was being planned versus the existing office. As far as the trip generation threshold, the county has and VDOT has their thresholds for traffic studies. We did not meet the thresholds for a traffic study. However, this is Reston, this is near transit. So a transportation study still was required. And this is actually my first under the county's new standard of a transportation study, just for folks on the group, because you'll be probably hearing this term more often. What we traditionally would call these would be operational analyses. And now Fairfax County has kind of come up with a new format called a comprehensive transportation analysis. So we still do the same things where we're going to evaluate, the key intersections. In this case, the key intersections that bring traffic in and out of the site. But more importantly, this is now becoming more of as in the term, comprehensive. So what the county wanted to see is more of a catalog of all the pedestrian facilities, bike facilities, anything has to do with multimodal, bus stops. What are the is there a bus stop, a bus shelter? What's the bus shelter look like? Are there any missing links with pedestrian paths out there? As far as what pedestrians have to go from the site to Metro, what's the street light system look like in the area? So we have completed a study. It's gone under initial review from county staff and VDOT. We've actually received very good praise on the study itself, but we know that there's still the application acceptance and an overall review of the application, which may kind of warrant additional questions or review from the transportation side of things.
Great, thank you. Last question, and I'll move on. Can you give us all a quick summary of the soapstone connector and just what's going on there?
Yeah, with the soapstone connector, and I'm trying to, what I believe is what I remember hearing from county staff is that is one of their number one priorities. I have a section in the study for the soapstone connector. And I believe right now, I think there's a plan to start construction, a target in 2027 with completion by 2030. And the soapstone connector itself, it's going to have bike lanes and sidewalks, things like that. I don't know if there's anything specific, with regard to timing or any specific question related to soapstone.
No, I just appreciate the overview. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Kevin and Brian.
Sure.
Kevin,
Yeah. Thank you.
Kevin, if I could just follow up with that, I think one of the concerns is the elevation of soapstone relative to this development. Can do we know enough about it, and can that be properly reflected on some future drawings to know the relationship there?
Yeah, I believe I guess Spike is on here. I know that there's been discussion talking about elevations, in particular whether or not our east-west road can connect to soapstone. I think we had some indication that we could make the connection, but I know the county is still, they're kind of looking at, as the road comes over the toll road and has to try to come back down the grade. There's probably a little bit more work on that factor, but I can maybe defer to
Yeah, we profiled that connection, the road going over there. And if you can imagine where that the soapstone road right there, and then it drops off and then it goes back up again to our site. So there's sort of a hole next in between us and that road. But that road comes very close to possibly allowing us to make that east-west connection there, but it still needs to be looked at a little bit further.
Yeah, and just to add to that, in conversations that we have had as a team with County DOT, we were actually, I think, more optimistic that this connection could work than County DOT was. They seemed to think that this connection would not work, and that this is going to be the primary and maybe only connection into Soapstone, and maybe this connection as well, but that the main connection would be the east-west road here, and that this grade is not going to work. So they essentially specifically told us, don't assume you can connect here and you can come into this cul-de-sac and have this sort of essentially like a small private road here, and the public grid of streets would go like this. For what it's worth. That's what we heard from them.
Okay. All right, let's go to Mike Jennings and then Lynn after Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Two comments on the trees. I noticed in your there's a letter that you submitted December 13th last year on sheet CO3 that says, with this application, all areas within the subject parcels will be entirely raised of all existing features when the sites are redeveloped. That's real hard for me to envision, because your property does dip into some of that central area of trees. And but on the other hand, I also know that if Reston and Fairfax County wants additional housing, then everybody's going to have to compromise somewhere. And so one thing I thought of is, if we have to lose some big trees, then maybe the trees that get planted are bigger than the 3-inch ones that you have proposed. Maybe we maybe as a committee or whoever, the county says, okay, you're going to cut there's nothing you can do to save those trees, then you need to put in, 2-foot diameter trees or something just to get things started. So, and I don't claim to know the economics, but I'm just throwing it out there because we can't all, just say, we want housing, but we also want trees. We got to have some push and pull at times. And then the only other comment is on the facades. I actually, unlike Matt, maybe I guess not being an architect, I think the townhouse looks pretty good. At least it's not another one of these spreadsheet facades like you have on the apartment building. So, just a different voice saying it doesn't look so bad to me.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I have also learned the term spreadsheet architecture this evening, so that's very helpful. So thank you. And I noticed our chair chuckling here about the diameter of the trees. And I think, Rob, what you were thinking is probably, is Fairfax County going to let you plant a 2-foot diameter tree with some of their planning standards? So we can talk about that. The point is well taken, and we understand that the trees are a significant focus. Obviously, with redevelopment, we are contemplating that we're going to go to the, essentially the 4 corners of the site to redevelop in order to make the development work. But we will certainly look at and take a harder look at where the trees are, so that we're all aware of what's happening and what we're proposing. And we can show you that with more detail at our next meeting.
Yeah, I think what would be helpful is when in a PDF or a drawing, do you overlay it's clearer when you overlay your property with the trees that are there. I know that when we did the General Dynamics property off Sunset Hills, they did that. It was very, very helpful. They had a very detailed, drawing of all the trees and how their property fit on it. I just know that would be helpful.
Yeah, and we can certainly do that.
All right, let's go to Lynn and then Michelle.
Thank you, Rob. And Brian, thank you so much for the presentation and the materials. This is my first deep dive into Reston planning and zoning. So I do want to, since we're talking about trees, I do want to concur with Tammy's observation about the fact that this property does have an incredible swath of trees that I really do think that there's an opportunity to develop around the trees and save them. In terms of the ADUs, I would just like to challenge, and I think I brought this up in the SSPA review as well, is that I'd like to challenge you all to replicate what Chuck Beach did with Aperture, and not just follow what the county is prescribing for ADUs, but really give back to the community and exceed what those, just don't do the minimum, just exceed expectations as it pertains to the community. And then in terms of the architecture of the facility, I think it was Matt that was a bit confused about the architecture. I would just like to point you all back to the design guidelines for Reston and challenge you all to maybe look at some new architectural excellence that is more reflective of Reston, as opposed to taking something that's already been done in Loudoun or Fairfax. Let's do something that's exciting for that space. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. We are excited about the triplex units. As the Toll team will tell you, and I will tell you, I think it's a cool new housing option. And if there's a way that we can figure out to make it work and have the design language work, we certainly want to do that. Because I do think it's an additional benefit from the standpoint of having a variety of housing options. With respect to the ADUs, one of the things I will say is that, of course, we're following what's in the Reston Comprehensive Plan Amendment. That would adjust, and we're so far early in the stage of the process. We haven't submitted proffers to the county. We haven't talked about the AMI tiers and that sort of thing. But for what it's worth, a lot of the changes that are in the Reston Comprehensive Plan draft that have already been made countywide outside of Reston in terms of adjusting the AMI tiers essentially accomplishes what Chuck did by lowering the AMI tiers. So if that becomes policy for Reston and we follow that policy, we would be doing, in essence, a lot of what Chuck was doing, for what it's worth.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Let's go on to Michelle.
Hey, okay, great. Let's start with the triplexes, or what, that one. You put up that one image that I think was described as convoluted. I don't see it in our packet. I tried to just go through it again. Can we get that somehow in some fashion?
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Additionally, Brian, I think you know this, but we're hoping to get the information sooner than Friday before the meeting. Can't speak for everyone, but you sent us a lot of stuff, and that was on short notice. So
yep, understood.
Appreciate a little bit better timing. Then, I mean, I recognize that you feel this is in line with the comprehensive plan on mix, but it's not. I mean, it's clear that half is 75-25, the other half is 50-50. And it doesn't have to just be office. I mean, that could be a retail. And right now you're talking about us looking just at these, 2 parcels of the 7, and they're very far away from really anything that can achieve and help people get basic needs met, especially with 439 units. So I think that that mix argument might be a great talking point, but it doesn't hold true, and you're not meeting the needs of people who live there. So yeah.
Well, the mix also is intended to be over a larger area for the metro station. It's not intended, as it's written in the comp plan, to be applied on a site-by-site basis. It has become that over time, but that was not the intent when it was written, for what it's worth. And I hear what you're saying about access to retail and amenities, and I think the one thing I would sort of respectfully push back a little bit on is when there are larger developments like Comstock's development, there will certainly be retail and restaurants and other amenities where they are more likely to be able to succeed, where there is a higher level of density and they're closer to the metro station than where we are.
That may be the case, but you can't rely on someone else to provide for your eventual residents. And so, we don't have any guarantee that this area will meet those mixes that we have in mind in the comp plan. And so it's kind of like just, everything's going to fall in the last one to file then. And so that doesn't seem like it's actual planning and ensuring that we get something that is, really working for the entire community and making sure that this is a successful area.
Well, yeah, and the last thing we want is to program retail that is not going to succeed. So we have to balance what is going on in other areas of the metro station and in the county as a whole with what we can realistically achieve on this particular site. And we certainly don't want to have retail that is not going to be viable.
Certainly. But again, we're not talking about a whole lot of parking. I just think that you have to make sure you're providing for basic needs, and that's not being met with what you've proposed alone. And that's all we get to look at. And that may just be the case since it's not coming as a joint project, but that makes this very hard to see how it works. But I want to really get to one point though, because I think this really seems like you're putting the cart before the horse. Why are we even talking? I mean, this has to go through the SSPA first. So I don't understand why we're doing this now.
We're doing this now because we have property owners who are ready to move forward with the rezoning application. The SSPA process is open. We've submitted the SSPA process, submitted the SSPA nomination. And the county made it clear in advertising the SSPA process that they would like to entertain more serious proposals as part of the SSPA process that have the likelihood of having rezoning applications associated with them. So I think from a process standpoint, we are very much in line with what the county staff has put forward as part of the goals of the SSPA process to move it away from a comprehensive plan only exercise to an exercise where the county is entertaining, from a comprehensive plan perspective, proposals that are more likely to be moving forward in a realistic time frame.
Right, but I'm assuming you've already seen the white paper from staff that the SSPAs in the Reston TSA will be on hold until we're done the Reston comprehensive plan. and then we'll require a whole study. So it doesn't seem that
Yep.
this is moving forward anytime soon. So again, it just seems.
Well,
you
I
know,
think there's a lot of progress that we can make during the process, and we will continue to participate in the SSPA process. We'll continue to participate in the P&Z process and come to you all and come to the neighboring cluster associations. And I think there's a lot of discussion that we can have. I think we've already learned a lot from this discussion that will be helpful to us as we move forward. So I think there's certainly benefit to it.
Mm-hmm. You know, what is the, do you have any idea if the parking for at least the triplexes would have EV charging?
It is a possibility, yes. We haven't figured that out in detail yet, but the triplex units could have an option for EV parking spaces.
And then the multifamily, the larger one?
Yeah, we would have options for EV spaces and a certain number that we would provide up front with EV spaces, and then the ability to, you know, have it wired so that, or not wired, but have it constructed so that it could be wired for larger portions of the building or the parking, you know, as we go forward.
Can you bring back more details on that?
Sure.
And more firm commitments there.
Yeah,
and then,
absolutely. And by the way, we will have details and firm commitments on, you know, stormwater management, green building, you know, tree preservation to the extent that it's possible to preserve any trees on the site, which we're going to take another look at. EV charging, all that stuff, that'll all be in our proffers. We're early. We haven't submitted a proffer statement. Our application's not yet accepted. So as soon as we get our first round of comments from county staff, we'll be responding with changes to our development plan and a set of proffers. And it probably would make sense for us to meet with you all, you know, a second time. We're going to meet with you at least a second time, but I envision we'll meet with you multiple more times before we get anywhere close to our hearings. But we will certainly, I think it makes sense for us to digest the county's comments, digest all of your feedback, put our heads together and work on it, and come up with some proposed solutions. And at that point, we'd have proposed proffers to share with you.
and then which school do you think, which elementary school?
Yeah, so we haven't gotten any feedback from the county, so we haven't gotten a school's memo, but I'm assuming it's Sunrise Valley Elementary School.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of issues with walking to Sunrise Valley Elementary School. So that should be considered because we really should be promoting walking and cycling in these areas.
I totally agree. And I know that there is a lot of focus on that, and particularly for the areas that have frontage on Sunrise Valley Drive with the cycle track and the sidewalk and so on. And obviously we can fit into that overall network. We'll take a look at it. I think we might be a little bit far from Sunrise Valley to walk, but that's an interesting question. We'll figure that out.
Okay. I still am not convinced that this shouldn't, you know, we shouldn't see through the SSPA process. So just don't want you to waste your time coming to us too.
No, but I appreciate that. Points well taken. We know that we're proceeding, you know, as we are, and that's our decision. So I understand what you're saying.
All right, let me, Lynn, I see you have your hand up again. I don't know if that's an old hand or a new hand, but.
Sorry, that's an old hand. I will
okay.
remove it.
Let me jump to
Okay,
Larry, see if Larry Butler has any comments, and then I'll go to John Carter, and then I want to kind of give a few comments myself. Larry, anything for you?
No comments at this time, other than the tree section. You know, the very southernmost tip of this site gets into the that sort of identified parcel that is in the backyards of all of the parcels on Association Drive, and I think really needs to take a hard look at that. And I agree with Mike Jennings' comment that an overlay of the existing tree coverage area would be really helpful. That's it.
Yeah, Brian, if I could piggyback on that one, I mean, what we really need to see in Reston is, you know, a really good existing conditions plan with all the trees, definitely the singular trees identified, and, you know, whether they're going to be preserved or not, we need to kind of understand it. Where are they? What are they? What condition are they in? And that's one thing we're just not able to stare at right now. And then I think this relates to the tree canopy coverage in Reston. I mean, yes, we're in a transit station area, but to be the absolute minimum of tree canopy is just not what we do in Reston. And so if, there has to be a more thought given to, if we're not going to save trees, we better propose more trees, as Mike had said. So let me move on to Commissioner Carter. See.
Did you get Jared? Did Jared get a chance?
I don't see Jared's hand up.
Okay, he's shaking his head no, I guess. But, everybody tries to be nice, and I think you've got an awful lot of compromises here. You've got stormwater management, the mix of uses. Nobody's mentioned access, but you do have access problems. Don't forget WDUs. There might be a policy, but the policy is to negotiate those. So just because they're seemingly standards, those are negotiated. Open space, curb management that we talked about on the last project, the tree survey. And I'm kind of with Matt, except a little more extreme, I think. I wonder if these building types are appropriate to a transit station area. Both the apartment building as you've designed and the triplexes. I don't know that those are appropriate for a transit station area. This notion of lifting the building up and having parking at the ground floor is not what a transit station is supposed to be like. We're supposed to be having wonderful streets that are well furnished and curb management issues. And so I think you've got an awful lot of compromises at this point. And I don't know. I don't know if those buildings work from my perspective.
How do you, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And I think you've got a lot of other compromises. You got a lot of work to do to get this started. So I wanted to be upfront with
yeah, I want to ask about
you've got to work with, but right now I think it doesn't have a good start. I guess it's a tactful way to put this.
If I may, when you say raising the parking up and having the building on top,
yeah,
where are we talking about?
Well, the triplexes, for instance, you have the whole ground floor is parking. So that's not a transit-oriented place. So you're taking advantage of the density that these transit-oriented places, but you're not meeting what the design intent is, which is to provide active streets. And a garage on the ground floor is not a very active street. So I just wonder about that. And I couldn't tell in the apartment building whether the first floor would be apartments or whether it would be
yeah, it was, yeah, that's the reason I asked, is the first floor of the apartment building is units.
Yeah. Well, it was hard to tell because different images, I think, had different examples. I guess the last thing, could you give us a notion of where these triplexes have been built in Loudoun or Fairfax? I mean, we know apartment buildings, I guess, but that might be used. This is Toll Brothers is doing these, so.
Yeah, Scott's on.
Yeah,
he can
like
answer that question.
We have not built them yet.
Yeah.
This is kind of what we were hoping will be perceived as a new innovative, product. So we are planning for it in several communities in Fairfax and Loudoun, but we have not delivered any yet.
So maybe we could see some more detail, even if they're in design stages and not. But I just wonder whether this is what a transit station is supposed to be like. And then would you throw in all those other compromises? I think this one has an uphill battle, just to be honest about it. Okay.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, so Brian, let me give a few thoughts here as well. First of all, I do appreciate you guys coming in early. Although I even wish you would have come in earlier, even before you file. I mean, some of the more successful developments here in Reston have come in, given us, got some feedback before they even filed to the county, and sometimes that's really helpful. So you're not wasting a lot of time. So I agree with some of my colleagues here that the SSPA process is going to be a hurdle to figure out this use issue, but that's why it's important for us to kind of see the bigger picture, and whether you control the bigger picture or not, but just to have a better sense of what's going to happen and what's going to be where, especially in Association Drive, but also in Comstock's development and the other surrounding areas. It's just harder to take that leap of faith with these percentage of uses that are in the comp plan without having a better roadmap for what's happening around us. And it's hard to look at just these, these one little pieces. I'm surprised a lot of the architects on the committee didn't mention about the massing of the building. I mean, this building is 650 feet in length, and I just think that's too long and too big of a mass that needs to be broken up in a big way. And that's certainly over 2 football fields long, and so was surprised nobody else commented on that. I mentioned the tree canopy. I think that's a big deal here. We just have to. I think we should look hard at some of the tree save areas that are possible. Even along the toll road, there's a pocket of trees along the toll road, and this development's relying on buffering from the toll road. There's no tree save on site, and we learned our lesson just up the street where that doesn't really screen a garage very well. And not that you can screen a garage with plantings, but that just means the garage facade has to look better along our front door of the toll road. The soapstone connector, I think that has to be really looked at carefully. I'm not so worried about the connection of the road. I'm worried about the height of the soapstone connector and what relationship that has to the architecture of the building. And, is this building just going to be up against a road embankment, and just what that truly looks like. We didn't touch on the importance of Reston Association, but, membership in Reston Association, a big deal here in the community, that. And then the architectural review that comes with, the design review board, I think is going to be critical on this one. And then lastly, I'll just finish with the stormwater management. This site drains to the really trouble area on Sunset Hills Road where the flooding occurs. And, to think that we can look back and try to compromise on quantity control is going to be a tall order. I think that just has to be looked at very carefully. That whole area, that whole drainage area is a troublesome area downstream. And so, each site's going to have to do their part. And this is where the big picture of all the development coming together on, this side of the toll road has to kind of help solve that problem on the other side of the toll road. So I agree with Commissioner Carter. There's a lot of issues here to kind of, work through. So I think it's just good for us to be straightforward and honest with you early on, so that you don't feel blindsided later on that some of these comments didn't come up, down the road. But I think there's a bit of work ahead of us.
Yeah, agreed. So, and we're happy to work through all of it with you. So appreciate the comments. I do think, and I'm clearly no expert, not only am I not an architectural expert, I'm certainly not an engineering expert either. But I am aware that I think there is some work being done on the issue that you noted about stormwater and on the north side of the toll road and how that's interacting between the north and the south side of the toll road. So I think there's work being done there by others. And I think our team at VICA, and Peter, jump in if you'd like to elaborate, but I think our team at VICA has coordinated with some of the other engineering teams on some of the other projects that are going on. And there's work being done in that regard. So that's certainly not lost on us. We're working on that as well in the background. And I can update you, excuse me, on that in more detail at the next meeting.
Okay. Are there any other questions the committee has before we wrap up?
Can I ask one last thing, just for curiosity purposes? But when you say we'll provide the triplexes present an opportunity to provide additional housing pricing levels, what prices do you have in mind for those then?
Scott, Angela, do you guys want to jump in on the pricing?
Yep. Yeah. So the flat, like I said, it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath for it's about $1,345 on the square footage, and right now we're projecting that to be in the low 600s. And then the upper side-by-side units that are coming in around $1,738 on the square footage, right around 700 or low 700s.
I'll just note, we do have some fair market affordable housing in Reston that could get you a little bit better than that for those prices or less. So, just as we're thinking about what's needed in Reston, we've got a lot of very expensive housing coming in, and I don't know that we're meeting the mark on on what we need for, to achieve true affordability and to achieve what people have in mind when it comes to affordability.
Yeah, we kind of thought that was using the triplex with the introducing the flat was a way to have a smaller unit that, I'm not going to tell you, sounds like I know it doesn't sound like we're giving them away, but it's a little bit more attainable rather than just doing townhomes where some of our competitors in Reston are selling them for well over $1 million. So that is some of the feedback we've gotten elsewhere also, is that does introduce a slightly lower price point. And I realize it doesn't sound like it as compared to what a townhome or a larger unit would be.
Scott, it will be interesting if you see these being built. Let us know. We'd love to kind of see them in their true form.
Yeah, we're hoping to start construction on some this summer.
Okay, good.
I'm sure.
All right, Brian and team, I appreciate your time here and your hard work up to this point. And I guess let us know how you get through the process and when you want to come back next.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate your time. Thank you for all the feedback. Like I said, I think we've got a lot of good comments to work on. We learned a lot at this meeting, so thanks for everything. And we'll let you know once we're accepted. We get, our first round of county comments, and as I said, we'll digest what the county says. We're going to go back and digest what you all have said, and we'll be back in touch.
All right, very good. Thank you, everybody. And
thanks, everybody.
Members of the committee, we don't have any other official business unless there's something that somebody wants to bring up. But I will.
I just wanted to say thank you. It was very interesting, and I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Well, yeah, congratulations to the new members. And this was a little bit of a long meeting, but this is what happens when, we have two cases certainly back to back on an evening, and but a lot of good commentary tonight, that's for sure.
Say, Rob, I've got something for you if you
yes,
have
sir.
a few seconds. I'm concerned about all these SSPAs. We have 11 of them, and they're all over the place, to be nice. We're going to put them all in tier 3, although I'd like to turn some of them down, frankly, but I'm not sure we'll do that. I think we need some better way to review those as a group. I really like to see how many housing units are we really proposing here as a whole collection. And I was interested. There are several other things that seem to be themes that go across the review process by the committee, and one that was added tonight, which I think is to my thinking, is this curb management issue. There's the tree issue. There's the collective units or commercial space. So I'm not sure we can or should be approving all of those SSPAs, but we'll need something overall to think about that. I think. I mean, we're just finishing up the comp plan supposedly, and now we're coming back and amending it. And I don't know. I've got some concerns about that. Anyway, maybe as a group we could talk about that at some point, or maybe I'll come up with something and you all can review it and tell me what's wrong with it. But I think I'm not talking about a competition, although I'd like to. That we don't. Fairfax County doesn't like that notion, but I've done competitions before when you have a whole lot of applications coming in at once, and you kind of set up some guidelines or standards on how to review them altogether. And I think we could do that without setting up a total competition. But like this last one, I think this last one just got a long ways to go, I think, from my perspective. Some of the other ones are straightforward. I think we even proposed putting them in the plan before, I think 3 of them. But some of them are off the edge. This mix, we got to deal with that, the mix. So anyway, that's just an extraneous thought. I've been thinking about that in the last few days. It's some way of looking at all of these at once. So anybody?
Yeah, John, you're right. I mean, right now there's no really official path for even our committee to be involved in the SSPA process per se, but we certainly, I think, can play a role you know, if, and help out in any regard we can.
Oh, I think you should. I think you should.
You know, and I even had a meeting with the zoning administrator the other day, and she even referred to the mix, not in this context, but even just mixes in general across the county wide. It's a struggle because of the lingering, or you know, the dwindling office need,
Yes.
at least at the moment. And so, you know, what does a county do for this? Just because it's a moment in time that there's a decline in one particular use